Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Council meeting 28th of November 2023. Great to see such a good audience here tonight. We've got some interesting items on the agenda, which is fantastic. We're moving to the agenda. So item 1 on the agenda is interim chairperson. Section 25 of the Local Government Act 2020 states that the election of the Mayor must be chaired by the Chief Executive Officer and be conducted in accordance with the governance rules. Chapter 2 of Council's governance rules further steps out the procedure for the election of the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor, including the requirement for the CEO to preside at the election of the Councillor to the office of Mayor. The elected Mayor will then preside over the election of the Deputy Mayor. The Chief Executive Officer will assume the role of interim chairperson to deal with items 2 through to items 9.1.2 of this agenda. Item 2 on the agenda, recording and live streaming of Council meetings. All Council meetings are filmed, with both video and audio being recorded. Video is focused on a specific area, however, audio from the entire room is captured. In common with all narrative during Council meetings, verbal responses to congratulations, obituaries and question time will not be recorded in the written minutes. By submitting a question, you consent to your question being read aloud at the meeting. The reasoning behind recording Council meetings is to hold us more accountable and to improve the transparency of Council's decision-making to our community. The full meeting is being streamed live on Council's YouTube channel, which is Alpine-Shire Council, and will also be available on the YouTube channel shortly after this meeting. Item 3 on the agenda is the acknowledgement of traditional custodians and recognition of all people. I ask everyone to stand. Alpine-Shire Council acknowledges the Taungurung peoples as the traditional owners of the lands on which we are meeting today. Council also acknowledges all of the traditional owners of the wider lands of the area known as the Alpine-Shire. We also acknowledge those people who have contributed to the rich fabric of our community, and we strive to make wise decisions that will improve the quality of life for all. Thank you. Before moving on to item 4 on the agenda, I'd like to just run through quickly proposed process for the ordinary Council meeting. So I remind all of those in attendance this evening that Council's governance rules stipulate the process for running a smooth Council meeting. The chairperson's role is to ensure that any motion, question or statement must not be defamatory, malicious, abusive or objectionable in language or substance, or outside the powers of Council. The chairperson must call a person to order if their behaviour is disruptive and interferes with the conduct of the business of Council. The chairperson may remove from the chamber any person whose behaviour disrupts the meeting or who fails to comply with a direction. Further, it is an offence under Council's governance local law for any person to fail to comply with a direction from the chairperson in relation to the conduct of the meeting. The chairperson reserves the right to close a meeting to the public gallery in accordance with the Local Government Act 2020 where there are security reasons, or to enable the meeting to proceed in an orderly manner. Where this is enacted, the meeting will continue without a public gallery, but will be live streamed on Council's YouTube channel in accordance with the Act. The chairperson also reserves the right to adjourn the meeting to another time or day if there is disorder at the Council table or in the public gallery. Move on to item 4 on the agenda, which is confirmation of the minutes. So this 4.1 is the ordinary Council meeting minutes from the 31st of October 2023. The recommendation in front of Council this evening is that the minutes of the ordinary Council meeting M10 held on the 31st of October 2023 as circulated be confirmed. I'm seeking Councillor Forsyth moving and Councillor Prime seconding. Any discussion that any of the councillors would like to have on the previous minutes of meeting? In that case, I'll move that one to the vote. So all councillors in favour of the recommendation, please raise your hands. It's voted unanimously in favour. Item 5 on the agenda is apologies. I'm not noting any apologies here this evening from councillors or directors. Thank you, Councillor Janus. Just for clarity, Councillor Keeble is online, so we have all of the councillors here this evening. We've got 6 in person and we've got Councillor Keeble online. Thank you, Councillor Janus. Item 6 on the agenda is obituaries and congratulations. I'm going to move around the room from my left, starting with Councillor Forsyth.
Thank you, Mr CEO. No, none tonight. Thank you.
Councillor Hughes.
Just a big congratulations for the Hot Rod weekend that was held just recently. It did coincide with Remembrance Day, and the feedback that we've had from many people is that there was a lot of respect held on that day, which is really good to see. And the ceremonies were well attended, so congratulations to everybody involved with making those events coincide together in a manner that is respectful. So thank you. And just because we do have the gallery here, to thank you all for making the effort to come tonight. We know that there's some big things being discussed, but in general, the public input and the focus and commitment on the things that have been on the table lately, I just want to congratulate everybody that has had some form of input, because it means that our community is paying attention and wanting to have a discussion on the things that's going to shape their future. So thank you, and congratulations to everyone involved so far.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Councillor Janus.
Just briefly, and in relation to Remembrance Day at the Myrtleford Memorial, a good turnout there from the public, but also very respectful from the hot rodders who were coming through town at that time, who slowed right down as they went past while the service was being conducted. So if the hot rod people could take that back to their committee, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Janus. Councillor Nicholas.
I'd like to congratulate the Bright Food Co-op. I was at their AGM recently and I was really taken by the constructive development over the last couple of years to bring local producers' produce into Bright so that people can buy it. And they also do a co-op click and collect, so you can order during the week and pick up on Thursdays of really delicious fresh food. So go for it. As many members as possible would be really good.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholas. Councillor Prime.
None from me.
Councillor Kelly.
Thanks, Chair. 11th of November was a big day for activities in our neighbourhood. I wanted to congratulate the Mount Beauty CFA. They had their 75th anniversary celebration on that day also. 120 odd folk gathered together to mark the occasion. And I did want to mention Paul Macklin and Andy Barber, who received their outstanding service medals. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. Sorry, Councillor Keeble next. Sorry, Councillor
Thanks,
Keeble.
Theo. Thanks, Theo. Congratulations to all our Year 12 students who have completed in the Shire in recent weeks their final exams, those that were sitting them. We wish them all the best, and all those Year 12 students that are heading off into different pathways starting soonish. So good luck to them. It's a long time, 13 years of school, so we wish them all the best. And also congratulations for the Remembrance Day. Mount Beauty was a great turnout. It was extremely well presented, the area, the cepitaph and the proceedings. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Keeble. The next item on the agenda, number 7, is declarations by councillors of conflict of interest. Before seeking councillors to declare any conflicts of interest, there is a topic I'd like to raise with the audience here tonight and with the councillors. So over recent months, we have received a number of emails from members of the community who have a perception of conflict of interest among our councillors in relation to one of the items on the agenda this evening. And I wanted to touch on that before we move into asking the councillors to declare their conflicts of interest. So obligations on councillors in respect of conflict of interest are very clear in the Local Government Act 2020, and they're very clear in council's governance rules. Councillors have been recently undertaken refresher training in conflict of interest by a respected external provider of legal services to the local government sector, so councillors are well briefed on their obligations in relation to conflict of interest. Specifically to the emails that we have received from members of the public who have claimed perceptions of conflict of interest, we have sought explicit feedback from the same provider of legal services. And the feedback reads as follows. Councillors are under no obligation to be directed or even guided in their assessments of whether they have a conflict of interest by the views expressed by members of the community. councillors need not alter their own assessments of their respective positions as a result of the emails received by the CEO. So I think in summary, it's up to the individual councillors for them to determine whether or not they believe they have a conflict of interest. They've been well trained, they understand their obligations under the Local Government Act and the Councillor Code of Conduct, and it is not for members of the community to direct them in certain ways as to whether or not they declare a contract. So I wanted to make that clear. We have received a question on notice this evening by Rob Moore, who's a resident of Bright. I will not be responding to that question on notice because it does deal with this perception of conflict, and I will not be taking questions on the floor this evening that relate to potential perceptions of conflict of interest among the councillor group. So with that said, I will now call for declarations by councillors of any conflicts of interest they want to raise this evening, and I'll start from my left with Councillor Councillor Forsyth.
Thank you, Chair. On tonight's agenda, I do not have any conflicts of interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Forsyth. Councillor Hughes.
None from me.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Councillor Janus.
None from me.
Thank you. Councillor Nicholas.
None from me.
Councillor Prime.
None from me.
Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Chair. I understand there is some questions on notice tonight around a battery energy storage system. I'll declare a general conflict of interest on that topic and step out of the chambers.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. Finally, Councillor Keeble.
None from me. Thank you.
Just a point of order, please, Chair, and that is it's not only councillors, it could also be directors that do have a conflict.
Thank you, Councillor Forsyth. To my two directors, Director Rees and Director Havercroft, do either of you have a conflict of interest to declare in relation to the business being discussed by Council this evening?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I do wish to declare a conflict of interest on the Mystic Park report. I'm the Chair of ACP at this point in time.
Thank you, Director Rees. Next.
I haven't got any conflict of interest.
Director Havercroft. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is public questions, and I want to explain briefly how we're going to run public questions tonight, because we have got a large number of public questions and a large number of people in the audience. So I'm going to run through, first of all, questions on notice which do not relate to the Bright Valley development. So we're going to run through first the questions that I've received on notice, and then I'm going to open the floor to questions. And when we have cleared that, we're going to move on to the questions which are specific to the Bright Valley development, which I understand is a key topic of interest tonight. We're going to run through the questions that have been received from the public on notice, and then I'm going to open the floor to questions. So hopefully that's clear. I think it makes a lot of sense to package up the questions together so we can get a bit of a flow into the discussion rather than having, typically we answer questions in the order in which they're received in council, but that would have us jumping around across different topics. So the first question I have this evening is from Glenn Wilson, and it relates to freedom of information. And Glenn Wilson has asked, it is close to 12 months since my freedom of information application was lodged and accepted by Alpine Shire Council. So question one, why has this simple freedom of information request not been fulfilled and finalised? And question two, when will this simple freedom of information request be finalised? And I'll direct that to Director Havercroft.
Thank you, Chair. A letter was issued to Mr Wilson's email address on the 28th of September 2023, which outlined Council's decision on the FOI application and the statutory processes that follow as a result. Following the conclusion of those statutory processes, Council will be in touch further with Mr Wilson.
Thank you, Director Havercroft. Question two is from John Hart, who's on behalf of the Bright Croquet Club. With the onset of summer, do councillors think it is better to have the red food waste bins collected weekly rather than fortnightly? I ask, as frequently the collector knocks over bins when picking up other bins, the red bin then remains uncollected for another fortnight, the food waste cooks in the heat of the bin and maggots, flies soon develop. The green garden waste bins are a luxury and the yellow bins could easily be collected less by scrunching the paper, etc. and the waste down. Thank you, John. I'll ask Director Rees to respond to this one, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, John, for your question. So the red bin collection is not planned to change from a fortnightly to a weekly collection at this stage. And we also request that all bins be placed 1 metre apart to enable ease of bin lift and minimise the risk of bins being inadvertently knocked over. Council will also be conducting a review of its curbside services after 12 months of the inception of the FOGO service has been passed in order to obtain feedback and opportunities for improvement. By way of comparison with other councils, many other councils have had a fortnightly collection of red bins, which are the general waste bins, and weekly collection of food and garden organic bins year-round with no problem. A couple of things that you may wish to consider to make things easier. Firstly, the red lidded bin is for general waste and should not contain organic matter that will attract vermin. Such items should all be sorted and placed in the green lidded bins for the FOGO service. For additional tips and tricks on how to manage your waste and sort it, I recommend going to the Hive Waste website. If you search hivewaste.com.au, it will take you there, and there'll be some additional recommendations on keeping organics and recyclables out of landfill.
Thank you, Director Rees. The next question I have is from Brett Lidbury, a ratepayer. The question is, how can we as a community, in partnership with the Alpine Shire Council, respond to graffiti vandalism in a rapid manner, namely to discourage vandals from continuing to deface public and private property? So the background: before arresting those responsible, the most efficient way to combat graffiti is to remove it rapidly. Leaving the vandalism for longer provides permission to continue, since the signal is that their work will remain on display for a long period. After speaking with the Shire Customer Service Officer, I am aware that different structures are the responsibility of different entities, and such boundaries inhibit a quick response to the clean-up. I'd like Director Rees, if you could respond to this.
Thank you, Chair. I guess it's really important to report any graffiti as soon as possible. This will enable us to get those jobs allocated through our customer service team to the appropriate outdoors teams to mobilise and remove the graffiti. I think probably in addition, if there are buildings that are not owned by council or managed by council, our customer service team is more than happy to place those requests with the appropriate agencies. We do this for Vic Roads requirements when inquiries come for repairs and maintenance on Vic Roads roads. Probably as a bit of context, just to provide, I think, a little bit more awareness in the community about the problems that we're having with vandalism. It's not only graffiti. We have an open spaces team that have a dedicated graffiti removal trailer, which has high pressure washers and is used throughout the Shire. The team aims to respond to all service requests within a week. However, due to high workloads, sometimes this is not always possible. We also have a buildings coordinator who is responsible for repairing all non-graffiti damage, such as smashed toilets, blocked toilets, toilets that have been removed from their location and placed on park benches, smashed toilet basins, stolen taps from toilets, door locks that have been glued, doors that have been kicked in, doors that have been removed, doors that have been set on fire, and the list goes on. We've been working with the community groups that we have access to, Vic Pol, the schools, and various sporting clubs. And despite all of these initiatives, we're struggling to be able to respond and reduce the amount of vandalism that is occurring in our Shire and the public amenity space. By way of context, in our financial year to date, it's cost Council ratepayers' funds more than $20,000 to address vandalism and graffiti. And due to the nature of this, some of these repairs take longer than what we would like to be able to respond, but under the circumstances, we're doing the best that we can.
Thank you, Director Rees.
Excuse me, Chair. I'm going to grab some chairs from next door. We've got a few folk. Maybe we should move to the battery topic.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly, for keeping our visitors comfortable. Next question I've got is from Mary Pike on behalf of the Upper Kiewa Valley Community Association, and I can see that Mary's in the audience, but I'll read Mary's question out. So on the agenda for tonight regarding the election of the Mayor, the recommendation is that the office of the Mayor be set for 1 year. As there is the option to choose 1 or 2 years, can the Council please explain why they have in recent years consistently opted for the shorter time? We believe that 1 year is a short time in which to take command of this taxing role. Anyone completely new to the role would barely have time to take control following induction and work through all the requirements before they were up for re-election. Mary Pike on behalf of the UK VCA. So I'm going to open the floor to the councillors here to ask for any reflections that the councillors might have on this question.
No? If I could just make one comment, and that is that on my term in council, which is now into the third term, which is 11 years, we've always had 1 year terms. My flippant answer is simply that if we get a bad mayor, we've only got a year to put up with them. I do take the point, though, Mary, that it is a steep learning curve for in the mayoral role. But looking around the group here, Alpine Shire is very fortunate in that in the last 3 terms we've always had a collegiate lot of councillors, and it's my understanding or my belief that any of them could have been mayor and sat in there, and they've probably got enough mentors behind them to help them in that position. So that would be my answer to that question.
Thank you, Councillor Forsyth. Would any of the other councillors like to comment?
If I could, please, Chair. In relation to tonight's elections, it will be set for 1 year because we have 1 year left in our term before we go into caretaker mode for the next election. So this one's kind of taken out of our hands in terms of that, but just to kind of talk to the point of, the group that this is my first term on council, and the group that I have been lucky enough to work with have been excellent mentors, and I've learnt a lot. And I think in this position we have very good conversations with each other before we make our decision, and I think the mentorship and growth that we can have in this space is allowable for that 12-month mark, because it doesn't mean that you can't put your hand up again for the next term if it is doing it year by year as well. So.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Any other comments from other councillors? No? Thank you, councillors. So the next question is from Sharon McAvoy and relates to Dedarang renewables project. I'm going to ask Councillor Kelly to leave the room as he's declared a conflict of interest. And Councillor Kelly's leaving the room at 5:23 p.m. So we've received 2 questions. So the first question is, given that we, Sharon and John McAvoy, personally wrote to the Alpine on the specific question of off-farm income, e.g. renewables, and you emailed us saying that you had deleted it from your draft 10-year strategic plan, what position will you take on the Dedarang BESS proposal and future proposals of this type in the Alpine Shire, noting that there is already a second landholder signing up? So that's question 1. Question 2, at our community meeting in Dedarang with close to 200 people present on the 16th of November regarding the proposed Dedarang BESS, many concerns were raised regarding community safety, environmental impacts such as incredibly toxic gas emissions and contaminated waterways in the event of a thermal runaway, site location in a high bushfire risk area, and in the event of an incident potentially compromising one of the most important pieces of infrastructure for Victorian energy, which is the Dedarang terminal station. How will the Alpine Shire address these risks and protect our community? So just for the clarification for the audience here who might not be aware of this, the BESS is a battery energy storage system. So it takes energy out of the grid and stores it in a very large industrial scale battery, takes it when energy is readily available and cheaper, and then it feeds that energy back into the electricity grid when electricity is at a higher price because there's less available. So typically at night time when you don't have solar, you may not have access to wind, it essentially feeds power back into the grid. So there was a community meeting on the 16th of November to discuss a proposal from an organisation that's considering putting in a permit application in Dedarang. So in response, I'll respond briefly, then I'll open the floor to any comments from the councillors, but in response to 2 questions, at this stage Alpine Shire Council does not have a formal position on this proposal, so it's an emerging issue that the councillors and the council staff are seeking information on. So council staff and council's officers attended the meeting in Dedarang on the 16th of November. Council's officers from my planning team are meeting with the proponent in the coming week, I believe, in order to get more information on what this proposal is. So council is still assessing the information and essentially hasn't yet formed a position. But having said that, I would like to open the floor to the councillors, and if there's any commentary that the councillors would like to add to this discussion. Councillor Prime.
Thank you, Mr. Jeremy. So, firstly, thank you to Sharon and John for attending tonight. It's a bit of a trip from Dedarang, so I appreciate that. And myself, Mr. Rees, and our what was our mayor? I'll word that correctly. Attended the meeting. I concur with Mr. Jeremy on this that we don't. I'm seeking more information on this as well, and we're well aware that there's a meeting being held too, and I feel like I need some more information in front of me at this point in time. There's been some emails forwarded. I think Councillor Forsyth has received the bulk of them. People have stopped me down the street, and if people would like to continue voicing their concerns or questions, absolutely more than welcome to keep receiving them, and I appreciate that they've been sent in as well and people have taken the time.
Thank you, Councillor Prime. Councillor Nicholas?
Yeah, but I concur with what Councillor Prime has said about people continuing to communicate with us about their concerns. I also wanted to reflect on an email I think Sharon wrote where the importance of renewables was put forward, and also reflect on some of the other people who are involved in this sort of thing who also recognise how important it is for community members to be part of the decision or to be engaged during the decision making. So I think it's terrific to have people tell us what they think, and work on getting some more information and working towards a solution.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholas. Councillor Janis?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Jeremy. I too have been approached by people in relation to this matter, and certainly encourage the feedback from the community. I know there's some strong feedback over there, but I'm also very conscious of making a stand at this point in time without having sufficient information from the parties involved, and we've got a very bare piece of information. And the reason I say that's not, I can't, well, I put myself in a position of what we call winky-pocked. If I've made a decision now to say that I will or I won't support a particular thing, when and if it does come to council for a decision, I can't vote on it because I've predetermined what I'm going to vote or how I'm going to vote. So at this point in time, I would just encourage people to contact us. Something funny, Leanne? No, thank you. I would encourage people to contact us with your concerns so that we can note them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Janis. Any other comments from councillors?
Yes, I've been fielding the emails, thank you, Sharon and John, and others from the Kiwa Valley. It's a situation where I'm sure that the people that are emailing are not necessarily against renewables. They're not necessarily against the fact that we're going down that path, and it's been a federal and a state decision that renewables are the way to go, and in order to have that you have to have storage of energy somewhere. I do take your point totally that the Dedarang area is probably not the right place for it. So from that aspect, I think we're just waiting on more information, as Mr. Jeremy said, with Mint and what they are proposing, and then whether or not we can theoretically, or not theoretically, but whether or not we can really advocate strongly to the actual minister at the state level regarding the siting of the BESS. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Forsyth. Any other comments from councillors? Thank you. Director Rees, would you please invite Councillor Kelly to return to the room, returning at 5:31 p.m. The next questions come from Brian Littlechild, ratepayer. I notice Brian in the audience here tonight. So I'll read this. State government planning regulation clauses 54 to 58 were introduced in 2001. They state that neighbourhood character is the mandatory starting point for making and assessing all residential development planning permit applications. So the question is in two parts. Why, in the last 22 years, hasn't Alpine Shire established its residential character zones and the accompanying descriptors that make planning permit decisions easier to assess and less controversial? And question two is related. When will it establish these zones? So I'll hand to Director Rees to respond to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I guess on reflection, our townships have really grown rather organically over the last period until more recently when we've had significant influx, and this has now become a priority. And as such, in answer to the second question, this process or the journey that lies ahead will unfold over the next 4 years. So it's 1 to 2 years to actually conduct the technical studies, and then 1 to 2 years to get the planning scheme amendment passed. And in order to give that level of priority to this work, we've created a dedicated strategic planning team, and Council has approved a dedicated budget for additional resources going forward from this financial year.
Thank you, Director Rees. Next question is from Doug Foots, Wandilligong residents. So the question is, recently my daughter came up for a holiday up to Wandilligong, took my granddaughter to the Bright Splash Park where I was of the understanding it was filtered water. However, after research I found out that it is bore water that is used. My granddaughter consequently caught a bout of gastro which was passed on to my daughter, which totally destroyed their holiday. After more investigation I found that this particular park has a history of children getting sick from the splash park, and the water comes from Morses Creek to the Othervans River is known for its high E. coli levels. So the two questions are, do the Council realise the consequences of not acting on a disturbing situation that seems to be common knowledge around the local residents? And question two, can I seek reassurances that this bore water and river water will be monitored with priority to avoid this happening to someone else's family? And I'm going to ask Director Havercroft to respond to this one, please.
Thank you, Chair. So thank you very much, Mr Foots, for raising this with us. We weren't previously aware, and we will undertake some investigations. But I have some very high-level information from our Environmental Health Officer in relation to question two. So we test the splash park weekly and find routinely very low levels or non-reportable levels of E. coli in that sampling. And we will continue to do weekly testing throughout the season. So we'll do some investigations and provide a more detailed response to Mr Foots directly.
Thank you, Director Havercroft. So that is all the questions we've received in advance which do not relate to the Bright Valley development. What I'm going to do now is open the floor to any questions from the floor which do not relate to the Bright Valley development. I'd like to receive and answer those questions, and then we'll move through all the Bright Valley development questions together as a package. So if there's anyone from the floor who'd like to ask a question, please come up to the lectern.
My name's David Fisher. I'm here from the Bright Caravan Reserve. My questions to the councillors. On the 21st of August this year, we placed a Freedom of Information request in regards to the lease between the council and the NRMA. This is part of the Act, the Crown Land Act. We asked for the management plan, which is also part of the policy in regards to Crown land and the use of it. We've also asked for the occupancy data, which is also part of the requirements for DECA for Crown land use. We're sitting here today and we still don't have any answers. Can I get some sort of commitment or timeline on when that information can be made available? I think it was a very simple request. Nothing.
Thank you, Mr Fisher. I'm going to hand this across to Director Havercroft to provide a response, perhaps by outlining what the FOI process involves and what the timeframes are in that process.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Mr Fisher. So I'm unable to clarify where that application is in the process, but as we heard from one of the previous questions on notice, who's been waiting for 12 months, they take a really long time to process through the system, broadly because there's a lot of appeal processes within it. So at each stage of the consultation that we undertake with any of the parties that are involved, there is a rather large time delay between those well, there may be multiple sections of consultation that are required before we get to a decision. So I'm sorry I can't tell you this evening where yours is up to. Our commitment is that we'll work through the FOI. So we will get to a point of making a decision and either releasing or not releasing information. And I don't know where this application sits to know.
That's contrary to my understanding of the FOI Act. It says you've got 30 days to respond, and in 45 days if there's an external party you need to consult.
So it takes a while to ensure that we've got the full understanding of what's being requested. And again, I'm talking without knowing where this application is at. And then once we've agreed between the parties that we're accepting that FOI and we're working through it, then we do have timelines that we have to meet to provide either further information or clarifying questions and so on and so forth. So on the face of it, yes, it sounds like it should all be done in 75 days, but that is very, very rarely the case because of the consultations that are needed and the period that we allow for people to take part in those. So I'm sorry that sounds really unsatisfactory, but the process takes a while.
I'm struggling to understand. The management plan is the council and the committee of management. So
Thank you, Mr Fisher. We've done our best this evening to answer the question. What I suggest is that you contact the officers outside of the meeting this evening with any further questions that you've had, and they can run through that process.
So there's no commitment on when that will be processed.
My suggestion is you engage with the council officers outside this meeting, and at that point, Director Havercroft will be able to find out the status of your particular application and advise you where it's sitting in the process.
Okay. Next question is, we've been asking questions in relation to the caravan parks makeup, as in camping, tents, camping sites, cabins, glamping tents, and a range of things. In the last meeting, it was mentioned and the Mayor picked it up, or the ex-Mayor picked up, that there was a mention of a 20% cap, and that was taken on notice. Can I have a briefing or a response to that question that we've been asking for 4 months now?
Director Rees, if I could ask you to respond to that question, please.
Thank you, Mr Fisher. As I mentioned in my correspondence with you recently, the team are working to resolve all of your questions, and I will contact you in due course once we have all of that information available.
Yeah. Again, I'm going to put the question back out there. 12 months is not acceptable for this type of thing. So is there when can we get a commitment to get answers?
So my suggestion, I thank you for your question. I appreciate you're a bit frustrated with our responses. My suggestion is you contact the office outside this meeting. Director Rees can work out from his team where the individual questions are and can provide you an update on when the likely responses are going to come.
Okay, right. Can I make a meeting with you tomorrow? Okay.
Perhaps if you contact me, and then we'll arrange a time.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, David. I'd like to invite further questions from the floor, not related to the Bright Valley development.
Good afternoon. I'm Bernard Eden, the Vice President, Reserve Committee in Port Arlington. Sorry, love. In Wandillagong, my apologies. I'd like to hand everything over to our Secretary and she will give you all the information that I've got here from old records of the parish of Bright and Wandillagong, if that's all right with you.
Thank you, Bernard. We appreciate your input into the process.
Sorry. Thank you.
And so the reason I have asked further questions, and I understand, so my questions are coming from Bernie's question tally. So Bernie has got maps, surveyed maps as far back as the early 1800s, and this is in relation to the Wandy Walk track, and it clearly does show that the land is public land. In many of the maps it describes it as picnic area. So I believe Bernie has been trying to get in touch with some representatives in at the Shire to get this track reopened, and unfortunately he hasn't heard back from your team members yet. The fact that it's been closed without the property even being surveyed is really not acceptable. So I'd like the Shire to take it on board, have the time to come and have a look at these maps that clearly shows that land is public, and it has been since the earliest map is 1862. Oh, beg your pardon, 1835.
So, thank you. Is there a question in here for the team?
So the question is, can you please, as of tomorrow, when you've got a team, go and get those fences removed, because this clearly, and that land is not surveyed currently. There's no pegs visible.
So I've heard one question there, and I'll ask my Director, Havercroft, if you could respond to that, perhaps with an update on the process.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr Eden, for bringing those maps in, and I'm really sorry that I was unable to make time yesterday to collect them from you when you came into reception. I think it's going to be a really interesting part of the research work that's required to establish how or if I can reopen the Wandy Walk, or whether Council has that ability. So this will be vital. I don't know if you're prepared to leave them with us, or whether you would like us to take copies of them. I don't know how you feel about leaving them with me for a couple of days so I can take copies and then get them back to you.
As long as I can trust you.
No. Maybe you can take time with him and he can come and bring them in to you and you could take photographs. I'm
happy to make an arrangement so that you can come back in. I can be trusted, so I'd like to place that on the record. And then we can sit down and talk about it as well. Because I know to the community in Wandillagong it's really important that we work through that piece of work to establish what those facts are, and all of this kind of information will help inform that picture. So thank you very much for making them available to us.
That's all right. Any time.
Can I ask how come the pathway can just be closed without the land being surveyed, and just accept what the two owners that have closed off the pathways word for, rather than looking into it and ensuring that it is correct, that it is their land?
Thank you, Kath. I'll take that as Bernard's second question. I'm just conscious we've got a big agenda tonight.
I understand that.
Perhaps, Councillor Director Havercroft, if you could just give a quick update to let Bernard know what is happening, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm really grateful for everybody's patience while I do that piece of research, and I understand it's frustrating that the owners of those properties have taken the decision to put fencing up there, but they believe that they are acting under the permissions that they have from their planning permission, and until I can establish the facts that that is contrary to what we think is the case, it would be really inappropriate for me just to be taking down what they believe is their private property. It doesn't feel like a fight that we need to enter if we can negotiate a position that's more satisfactory for everybody. So I would like to work through that to get to a conclusion on that stage, share back out to the community what we've found, and hopefully work collaboratively through whatever comes next to get to a resolution, rather than taking action immediately on it. But I do recognise that that's a very hard situation for the members of the Wandillagong community.
Even though the fencing is down right to the rivers.
Thank you, Director Havercroft. Thank you. Unfortunately, team, we've had you two questions. We've got a large crowd tonight. We've got a lot to cover. Perhaps if you could arrange the meeting as discussed, and then Director Havercroft can provide a bit more context.
All right. Thanks very much for your time.
Helen will reach out to Bernie tomorrow to arrange an appointment.
Could I seek any more questions from the floor that are not related to the Bright Valley development, please?
Right.
Good evening. My name's Ray Dyer. And I wonder how many questions I'll have this month, because I think it was last month I had 2 questions that I went back on previous meetings and still got no answers properly. When it comes to the garbage bins, and I asked about the recycling.
Mr. Dyer, could I ask that you get to the point, the specific
Well, the point is, the point is...
2 questions, please.
I'm going back on the questions, Will, but the point is the recycling, I've asked whether it is dumped in the skip bin and goes to Echuca or it gets sorted out. Now, Alan was quite nice. Hang on, I'm talking, Will.
Question, if I could direct that first question.
Well, the question is...
Councillor Rees, I heard a question there. Is the recycling being dumped in the tip in Echuca? I believe we have answered this question. But Mr. Rees, if I could ask you to respond to that first question. Mr. Dyer, you get 2 questions tonight. I've got a crowd of people.
Yes,
I know.
I'm
not spending this evening listening to a long journey through the history of the questions you asked. So get to your specific questions.
Well, the question, the answer to that question is that some of the garbage bags are soiled. Now, I'd like to know what percentage of garbage bags are soiled.
Thank you. That's your second question. Director
No, that's the first question.
Your second question. The first question was where they're going. Director Rees, if you could respond to that. And then, Mr. Dyer, you have had your 2 questions, and I will ask you to sit down after this. Thank you, Mr. Rees.
Thank you, Will.
Thank you, Mr. Dyer. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Rees, if you could.
So I think the first point, as we've said before, Mr. Dyer, is that unfortunately we do suffer from significant levels of contamination in our public place bins. And the way we treat that is that all refuse is inspected. If it is not contaminated, it goes into the recycling. Unfortunately, when it is contaminated, we're obliged to put it into the general waste, which is a shame.
Well, my second question was, Alan, what percentage of recycling bags go in and go out? Okay? Go into the bin or the bin. So that's the question for this month, because you can't tell me what percentage of garbage bags are soiled. So hopefully you'll be able to tell me next month.
Thank you, Mr. Dyer. I'll take that on notice.
Thank you, Mr. Dyer. Could I call for any further questions from the floor this evening that don't relate to the Bright Valley development? Okay, we'll move on. So we're going to move on now to questions on notice relating to the Bright Valley development. So I'll start with the first questions. So first question here is from Leanne Boyd, resident ratepayer. There are actually 3 questions submitted, but the second 2 questions are very similar. They're overlapping. So question 1, affordable housing has been addressed as part of Council's consideration of the planning permit application concerning Bright Valley. Can you please explain how this has been done? And I'll hand that question to Director Havercroft for her to respond.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ms Boyd. The proposal has been assessed against the statutory requirements of the Alpine Planning Scheme and the Planning and Environment Act 1987. There is currently no state government policy on affordable housing. The planning assessment includes consideration of housing diversity, such as lot sizes and housing types, which result in a varied offering of housing choices for potential residents.
Thank you, Councillor Havercroft. Sorry, Director Havercroft. The questions 2 and 3 from Leanne are both similar and relate to tree protection. So I'll read question 2, and I think it covers off on question 3. Council is still yet to follow up with a protection overlay for the Great Alpine Road entrance trees in front of the Bright Valley development. Why was this not incorporated into the last planning scheme amendment so as to add timely protection to the gateway trees? On the Alpine Shire website, it states that the preliminary heritage investigation would take 6 weeks. If the boulevard is found to meet the thresholds, Council will approach the Minister for Planning and request that they apply the appropriate controls. Council will take the appropriate action required based on the outcome of this investigation. Question for Director Rees. Thank you.
Thank you, Leanne, and thank you, Chair. So in order to apply an interim or permanent heritage control, you need to have the detailed assessment, which among other things needs to include a place citation report, a statement of significance, and a curtilage for the heritage place. Curtilage is a demarcation of that particular area. The detailed assessment is expected to be submitted to Council in early 2024 for consideration, and the detailed assessment will provide the strategic justification to apply an interim or a permanent heritage control. The strategic planning process involves an initial assessment, which we've undertaken, to establish the likelihood of the threshold being met, and then, based on that report, it is followed by a detailed assessment which is currently underway. Council has in fact engaged with the Minister on 2 occasions to ensure that they are fully aware of these developments and the current situation.
Thank you, Director Rees. The next questions are from Claire Johnson, also a Bright ratepayer. With reference to the Bright Valley development and protection of the gateway trees, given that Council is pursuing the first recommendation of GML's preliminary heritage assessment to proceed to a detailed assessment of the avenue, why is it not adopting the further recommendation of the report, such as application of an interim heritage overlay or significant landscape overlay? I'll direct that question to Director Rees.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Chair. So we are in fact following the recommendations, and ultimately the Minister will be the determining authority on any heritage or significant landscape overlays and whether they should be applied.
Thank you, Director Rees. So the second question from Claire. What is the purpose of allocating tens of thousands of dollars of Council budget to a detailed assessment of the gateway trees, only to determine their heritage value after they have been cut down? So I'll direct that one to Director Rees as well.
Thank you, Chair. At this stage, we have completed the preliminary assessment and we're in the process of the detailed assessment. This work has been brought forward due to community interest and typically would have been done at a later stage in our structure planning work. Unfortunately, there is this dislocation between strategic planning timelines and the work that is undertaken as part of strategic planning processes and the statutory process, which is assessing applications. So in this case, we can understand the misunderstanding or the kind of juxtaposition of timing that it takes to actually get this work done compared to the statutory process of assessing an application.
Thank you, Director Rees. Next questions are from Kate Farrell, Wandilligon resident. So the first question is the Bright Valley development going to have its own sewerage treatment plant? Director Havercroft for this one.
Thank you, Chair. The permit application that's being presented this evening is only for stages 1 and 2. These stages do not include a sewerage treatment plant.
Thank you, Director Havercroft. The second question from Kate Farrell actually relates to the Wandy Walk. And I'll read it out. Thanks to Wandilligon's long-term resident Bernard Eden, he has kindly shared his collection of Wandilligon survey maps that he purchased many years ago from a deceased estate. These maps from various years clearly identify the land known as Wandy Walk as public land and Crown land. Can you please ensure this matter is reviewed as a matter of priority and this track is open back to the public as soon as possible? So I believe we've addressed that one with the response to Bernard Eden earlier this evening. The next questions on notice come from Kath Healy from the Save the Gateway Trees Action Group. So 2 questions, both in relation to the Bright Valley development. The guidelines of the Ministerial Direction Potentially Contaminated Land PPN 30 clearly state that a PRSA is to be carried out prior to a subdivision decision, and then if the PRSA identifies that an environmental audit is required, that this can then form part of a condition of the subdivision plan. So the first question is, why is it that Alpine Shire Council is not adhering to the guidelines of the Ministerial Direction Potentially Contaminated Land PPN 30? And I'll give that to Director Havercroft to respond to.
Thank you, Chair. PPN 30 requires that councils consider whether land is potentially contaminated and act accordingly. In this instance, the application was accompanied by a preliminary site investigation, which council independently reviewed. The assessment at this stage was that there was a relatively minor risk of potentially contaminated land, and therefore it was appropriate to seek a PRSA post-planning permit. It's noted that PPN 30 states a PRSA requirement will usually be feasible to undertake prior to the issue of a permit, but this may not always be possible or reasonable for an audit requirement. Requiring an environmental audit as a condition of a permit may be acceptable if the responsible authority is satisfied that the land can be made suitable for its proposed use or development, i.e. that contamination will not preclude the proposal.
Thank you, Director Havercroft. The second question from Kath Healy. Who is going to ensure compliance is met for the 110 conditions set out for the Bright Valley development site, especially when the Alpine Shire Council does not currently have a compliance officer employed? And this question also for Director Havercroft, please.
Thank you. I suppose the short answer is that Council will engage the resources required to ensure compliance is delivered against the permit conditions, but it might be helpful to set out what the process is from here and how compliance will be secured. So the planning permit, so subject to this evening, planning permit is issued for a subdivision. This includes conditions on what is being approved, how it will be designed and constructed, and additional information will be required prior to any final approvals. Authorities other than Council will also require conditions to be met. Then there's a phase around certification. So plans are submitted under the Subdivision Act for certification. This ensures it meets the planning requirements, referral authority conditions, and plans are to be submitted and checked by relevant officers and subject matter experts before approval. That could include the engineering, the landscaping, and the bushfire studies that are referenced in the conditions. And then there's a statement of compliance, the final approval, where all relevant requirements must be met and where physical works on site and any other outstanding matters can be considered and compliance checked. This allows plans to be lodged with the title office for separate titles to be established. It's important to note that it's the responsibility of the applicant to be compliant with their planning permit conditions, any planning permit conditions and any applicant, and to adhere to them over the longer term. With regard to the application being presented this evening, many of the conditions must be to the satisfaction of the responsible authority as set out above when we did the planning permit for the subdivision part of the process.
Thank you, Director Havercroft. The last and remaining questions, so I've got 3 extra questions from Brian Littlechild of Bright, so he's already submitted 2 questions this evening, and typically that's our cut-off, but I'm going to accept these questions because I think it's important that the audience hear them and the responses. So the questions are, did the D Group offer Council an inducement of $1 million if, by the 25th of December, it was granted the Bright Valley Development Planning application? That's question 1. Question 2, if the inducement offer was made, was it accepted by Council? And question 3, if paid, when and on which projects is the $1 million to be expended? And I can respond to this very simply. The answer to question 1, did the D Group offer Council an inducement of $1 million? If by 25th of December it was granted the Bright Valley Permit Development application, the answer is no. And therefore the answer, the second 2 questions, the second and third, become irrelevant to this conversation. I wanted to make that very clear. There has been no inducement or any other payment offered by the D Group to influence Council in its decision around this permit application. So that concludes the written questions that were received on notice in relation to the Bright Valley development, and I would now like to open the floor to questions from the floor in relation to the Bright Valley development. I'd like to remind people who've already submitted questions on notice, if they've had 2 questions answered on notice, they are not entitled to ask further questions this evening from the floor. So I'll invite anyone from the floor who'd like to stand and ask a question. If you could perhaps, yeah.
Hello, my name's Enzo. I've got 2 simple questions. The first question is, what is the act that gives the Alpine Shire legal authority to approve or disapprove a development? And the second question is, are there guidelines or steps that need to be followed before an approval can be made?
Thank you, Enzo, for your 2 questions. I'm going to direct them, if I could, to Director Havercroft to give a response, if possible.
Thank you, Enzo. The first question's excellent, and it's put me on the spot. I don't know the specific section, but it will be contained within the Planning and Environment Act 1987 that provides the Council with the jurisdiction to be the responsible authority for planning applications that are submitted within its municipality. But I don't know the specific section, I'm afraid, off the top of my head. And in relation to the second question, are there guidelines? So the structure of the planning schemes, which guide the clauses that we need to consider in taking an assessment, start at the state level and then become more detailed as you go towards the Alpine Shire planning scheme, and then include local policies that we might have within our own shire that we would like to have in addition to what the state Victorian planning policy has. Then we have a municipal policy and then the Alpine planning scheme, and within that then there may be bits that are very specific to Bright or
So there are
Motherford.
3 layers of bureaucracy before a decision is made. I'm sorry, that's a third question.
So all of those layers are considered at the local level by the council officers in forming a recommendation to council or to be determined under delegation. They consider whether any application meets those clauses for all of those levels. So it's all done at the local level for this type of application.
Thank you.
Thank you, Enzo. Thank you, Director Havercroft.
My name's Ian Stevenson. I live in Walnut Grove. I previously lived in Wandillagong, and the question I'd like to ask, number one, is how come we're proceeding this issue with regards to this permit without having made clear what's happening with the drain in Stacky Gully Road? Could that be answered, please?
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. I'll hand that to Director Havercroft to respond to on the basis that this is a statutory planning assessment of the permit that's been received.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. So I think the question is, how come we're proceeding with the application while the drain in Stacky Gully hasn't been determined? And so this evening we're assessing the application for stages 1 and 2, and they're not contingent on the work in Stacky Gully being completed at this stage. So that we don't have to, in order to be able to make a recommendation for councillors to consider this evening in relation to the stages 1 and 2 of the development.
Well, it does have serious consequences to our street and the people in it and their quality of life and how they're going to live their life over the next 10, 15, 20 years of this subdivision if it proceeds. People in Stacky Gully Road, the Bright Resort, and the other street that runs off the Stacky Gully Road are also affected in relation to flood, fire, congestion, dust, poisons in the atmosphere, and noise. My second question is, why is not a full environmental impact study in front of us today?
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Could I direct that to Director Havercroft for a response, please?
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Desperately taking notes. So as hopefully the question on notice responded to why we're not sitting at the moment with a full environmental audit being undertaken. It's a condition of the recommendation this evening. So the planning application, the planning permit would come with a condition that requires them to continue with their PRSA, find the outcome of that, and determining whatever the outcome of that is would say what the next stages are, which could include a full environmental audit if it's determined required under the PRSA work that's undertaken.
Well, the people, my neighbours and people in Bright Resort, Stacky Gully Road and the street that runs off it, would all be interested in a full environmental impact study to look after and see how the township of Bright, the Alpine Shire, the towns that run off from here are affected by the subdivision with regards to many, many things. Fire, stormwater, general environment and congestion, road traffic getting out onto the main highway, whether there's traffic lights required, roundabouts, time to get through onto the main road, especially in the case of fire or flood, and the general congestion of the Bright area. So we're very, very concerned and would require a full environmental impact study.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. I'd like to invite other members of the public with questions on notice from the floor relating to the Bright Valley development.
It's just about the... Sorry, I just wanted to...
could you
just
state your name?
Sorry.
Yep.
Brodie Everest from Myrtleford. I just wanted to clarify the number of trees proposed to be relocated, because it says in the report here, the applicant provided an arborist report. And the report concluded that the removal of 2 mature trees would be required in addition to the relocation of 2 other trees. And then further down it says the plan identifies tree 18 and 19 as the mature trees that will be lost, as well as trees 17, 21 and 22 proposing to be relocated. So I just want to know if it's 2 or 3 trees.
Thank you, Mr. Everest. Director Havercroft, could you provide that confirmation?
So the confirmation I can provide, sorry, thank you, Brodie, for the question, relates to the conditions that are set in the planning permit should be approved this evening, is that the applicant can only remove 2 mature trees. If they find they have to remove more, then it is subject to further referral back to council, so that council can make a decision.
I meant the ones that we relocated.
Oh.
Yeah.
So my understanding is that the relocation is of 2 semi-mature trees, not 3. But, sorry.
If I could just interject there, I'm not confident that it's 2. I think we might need to come back. I believe it may be 3 in the documentation we provided.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah. So just for clarification, it's 2 mature and relocation of 3.
Oh.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Everett. Are there any further questions from the floor in relation to the Bright Valley development?
Hi, I'm Vivian Brotto. I just wanted to ask, why is it that we're dealing with just stages 1 and 2 at the moment? I know that that's the first stages to be opened up. We really should, I think, be looking at the development as a whole and the number of trees that will go in its entirety and what it's going to do to the community once the whole thing is finished.
Director Havercroft, if you could respond to that, please.
Thanks. Did they not?
You have to put it really close to your mouth.
Oh, gosh. I was really just asking about stages 1 and 2. We're talking about just the number of trees that will be affected in this first round of development. I would like to know really what the development is going to do over the entirety of the process and how it's going to affect us as a community, not just the trees, the whole development, and why aren't we looking at the whole thing, not just the beginning of it.
Thank you. Director Havercroft, if you could.
Thank you, Vivian. So the application that was put into council was just for stages 1 and 2. Each planning application is considered on its merits based on the information that's provided by the person that puts in the application. So that's what we have before us to determine. And the more broad what the site might look like and some of the higher level details were presented and approved as part of the development plan in July of 2022, which shows the more broad outlook for the entire site, and this is kind of drilling down into the first stage of detail, which is what we've been presented as stages 1 and 2.
It feels like we're only dealing with the beginning of it rather than looking at what it's going to look like at the end. So my second question is in regards to the 5% of open green space. I understand that DEEGs have proposed that the 5% will be allocated over, and it isn't in stages 1 and 2, I don't believe, but it will be allocated in the embankment area, which is not nice and flat and accessible to all of the members of our community. So what I'd like to know is it possible for council to dictate or to recommend or to somehow implement other open green space that can be accessible to kids, you know, kicking a football or running around, some open green space on flat land, valuable flat land for easy access? Or could we also consider the Stacky Gully redevelopment? Could there be some sort of a streamside reserve created there, perhaps, as open green space?
Thank you, Vivian. Director Havercroft, if you could respond to that one, please.
Thank you, Vivian. I may only be able to respond to the first part. I'm not sure if I know enough details around the Stacky Gully pieces of work to be able to comment on that. But in stages 1 and 2, the applicant has adequately provided us with the requirements for the 5% open space. Actually, it's quite a lot more than 5% allocation of open space, and I note your comments around some of it feeling like it's encumbered rather than unencumbered open space land, and that's part of the ongoing conversation with the applicant around what the other stages might look like too, so we can ensure that we do have significant open space that's completely usable by everybody.
So is that an ongoing discussion that
so
you may be able to open up?
So for the purposes of this evening's council agenda report, we're just considering what's sitting in stages 1 and 2 to make a determination, but the conversation with the applicant hasn't closed for any of the further stages to make sure that we get the best possible outcome that we can.
Thank you. Any further questions from the floor in relation to Bright Valley development?
Evening, my name's Lawrence Brassard, ratepayer. In regard to my predecessor here, in regards to site 1 and 2, which is 78 lots, now my understanding is from all the previous questions and answers given that the future of the remaining development is subject to many considerations, reports, environmental reports. My first question is, why then is the council considering allowing the D group to do a major entrance, hence the trees, the whole reason we're here, for site 1 and 2, when there is a possibility that the remaining of this development will not be approved, and that the sacrifice of our heritage trees to allow D Group to have a grand entrance for 78 lots potentially in the future?
Thank you. If I could ask Director Havercroft for you to respond to that one.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Iris. I may have got your name wrong, sorry. Iris? Was your name Iris?
Lawrence?
Lawrence, sorry, I didn't catch it at all. Thank you very much for your question. I think the question was why proceed with lots 1 and 2 at this time when all of the assessments haven't been done for all of the stages, and I apologise if I've butchered your question slightly there. So we have the application before us for stages 1 and 2, and the same level of scrutiny and thoroughness will be attended to when the other stages are put in for applications in the future. But at the moment, we can only assess what has been submitted to us, which is just the stages 1 and 2.
That's my question I'm asking, though, is why is such an expensive grand entrance being considered for site 1 and 2? Would it not be more sensible to consider another site that does not require all of this very expensive multi-million-dollar roadworks to be achieved for a development potentially that might not go any further than site 1 and 2?
Thank you. I may have to just repeat my previous answer because it's up to the applicant to put on the table what they would like to have assessed, and they have, and that includes the entranceway and the stages that 1 and 2 that have been presented and are set out in the council agenda this evening, and it's on that basis that the assessment has been undertaken to provide a recommendation to council this evening.
And my second question is, would the council then be open to considering, with the D group are saying that with site 1 and 2, yes we can, but for now let's leave it to a minor entrance that will not require any destruction of tree or major roadworks
So
on the Alpine Road?
Perhaps if I could respond to that by saying let's leave that to the discussions that the councillors will have when they're debating the report that's in front of them, rather than preempting what council may or may not choose to do with this recommendation.
No, I just asked if the council would consider it.
So I'll repeat my response. I would like to leave that to the debate that council will have when they're debating the recommendation that's in front of them, and I thank you for your 2 questions. Are there any further questions from the floor? Thank you.
My name's Yuri Tibulich. I have 2 questions. Did council consider the spread between 5 and 10% public open space contribution? And more specifically, on the tree protection, I've read through the recommendations and the draft planning permit conditions. Would council consider, it's 2 parts of this question, an independent arborist to oversee the tree protection zones? First question, part A. And secondly, there is a suggestion of a 5-year management plan for trees, those trees to be protected. It's well known in Melbourne and around metropolitan areas that those timeframes have been vastly extended from 2 to 4, and now they're 6 to 8 years in terms of management of those assets. So I'm putting those 2 questions. Why was it 5% and not the range that's represented in the planning scheme, 5 to 10? Tree protection zone overseen by an independent arborist, obviously paid by the DEEGs, and the 5-year management plan, which I think is part of the recommendations. Would council consider that to be a longer period?
Thank you, Yuri. I'll put the first question to Director Havercroft in relation to the 5 versus the 10% public open space contribution.
Thank you, Chair. So we are legally obligated to assess against 5%, and that was ratified when we recently did our planning scheme review, that was placed within the Act and then within our planning scheme that we would seek 5%. We haven't done the work to ensure that to ask the question whether we could increase that from 5 to another number. So at this stage, we're seeking 5%.
Thank you, Director Havercroft. The second question, I think Director Rees might be better placed to respond in relation to how we're going to manage the implementation of the tree management plan. Director Rees, are you able to respond?
Thank you, Chair. Well, broadly, as Director Havercroft mentioned earlier, in terms of compliance, it's incumbent upon the applicant to ensure that they are compliant, and that we would then resource appropriately to ensure that tree protection zones are in place and adhere to, and management plans are set out and approved.
Thank you, Director Rees.
Point of order, please, Chair. Sorry, I've just got some messages from people that are locked out that are wanting to come in. If there's a possibility, we can open the doors, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. So I'm conscious of time this evening and that we've got a couple of big decisions ahead of us. I'm going to take 2 more questions from the floor, if you've got any in relation to the Bright Valley development, and then we'll move through the business of the evening. Are there any further questions from the floor in relation to Bright Valley specifically? No, I didn't need to say that about the 2 questions then. So thanks very much. That concludes the questions on notice for this evening. So we're going to move on to the next item on the agenda, which is presentation of reports by officers. 9.1 on the agenda is presentation by the Chief Executive Officer. Sorry? 9.1?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. 9.1.1 is the mayoral term. So this is the first report to be presented. Section 26 of the Local Government Act requires Council to resolve to elect a mayor for the term of either 1 year or 2 years before electing the mayor. It should be noted that general elections in Victorian councils occur every 4 years on the fourth Saturday in October, with the next scheduled election due to be held on the 26th of October 2024. The term of all councillors officially ends at 6 a.m. on the day of the election, meaning that the term of the mayor will also end on that day. It really restricts the mayoral term to a single year on this occasion. However, recommendation ahead of us this evening is that the term of office of the mayor be set for 1 year, ending at 6 a.m. on Saturday, the 26th of October 2024. Move it. Councillor Nicholas to move and Councillor Janus to second. Councillor Nicholas? No? Councillor Janus? Any other councillors? No? In that case, I'll take that to the vote. If you could raise your hands if you're in favour of the recommendation as noted. Thank you, and that's endorsed unanimously. Next item on the agenda, 9.1.2, is election of the mayor. So the council report outlines the role of the mayor, the specific powers of the mayor, and I'm not going to run through that this evening, given the time. So I'm going to move straight to the business of calling for nominations and a seconder for the office of mayor in accordance with Chapter 2 of Council's governance rules. So I would like to seek nominations. Candidates to be nominated by another councillor for the position of mayor this evening. Are there any nominations?
I'll nominate Councillor Forsyth.
So Councillor Janus nominates Councillor Forsyth.
I'll second.
Councillor Hughes seconds it. Councillor Forsyth, do you accept that nomination?
Accept the nomination.
I would like to ask if there are any further nominations of councillors for the position of mayor. So on the basis that there's only been a single nomination for mayor, that nomination has been seconded and accepted by Councillor Forsyth. The vote will not be taken and the councillor will be declared elected to the office of mayor. So I declare Councillor Councillor Forsyth, elected.
Thank you.
Elected to the office of the mayor. And at this point, I'm going to hand over the running of the meeting to the elected mayor, Mr. Forsyth.
Thank you.
I'll stop with you. I'll jump from there. Yeah.
Oh, I'll get him.
Go to John's, yeah.
Okay.
Well, thank you, fellow councillors, and hello, everybody. Just a point of order, could we just, it happened once earlier in the evening, if you've got mobile phones and not on silent or airplane, could you just please do that? Right, into the actual meeting itself, I think. No. The actual meeting, 9.1.3, the office and the term of Deputy Mayor. We have a recommendation that Council establishes an office of a Deputy Mayor and that the term of that office be aligned with the term of the Mayor. Could I have a move and seconder, please? Councillor Nicholas, seconder. Councillor Janus, thank you. Any comments? No. Those in favour? Thank you. That is carried. Yes, you mentioned about Mr. Keeble there. Thank you. The election of the Deputy Mayor. Right, we've decided that we are going to have a Deputy Mayor for the next 12 months. So I will now call for nominations for that role of Deputy Mayor. Do I have any nominations?
I'd like to nominate Councillor Simon Kelly, please.
Thank you. And you'll second it. Thank you. Councillor Hughes and Councillor Nicholas. Councillor Kelly, would you accept that nomination?
I accept that, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other nominations from the floor? No. In that case, congratulations, Councillor Kelly. You are the Deputy Mayor.
Want to sit down here?
You're right tonight? Okay. Excellent. The next item is 9.1.5, which is contracts approved under the delegation of the CEO. I'm actually going to let the CEO talk to this particular one. The recommendation is that capital project contracts approved under delegation be noted, but I'll let the CEO talk as to why we actually have this as an item.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So back in the June 2023 Ordinary Council meeting, Council increased the financial delegation of the Chief Executive Officer up to $200,000. I've determined to present to Council the contracts that are awarded, the capital works contracts under my delegation for transparency and to improve the quality of our capital works reporting to Council. So this is the start of this journey. This used to be a feature on Council meeting agendas and it dropped off sometime in the last couple of years. So I'm reintroducing it because I think it's important for the community to see what contracts are being awarded. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. And I also think that there is a time for councillors, if they question what the CEO is actually agreeing to, up to $200,000. So I think for that it's a very transparent thing. This is just to be noted. Just could I have a mover and seconder for that, please? Thank you, Councillor Janus. Councillor Hughes. In favour? Thank you. That's carried. 9.1.6, the schedule of the Ordinary Council meetings for 2024. The recommendation is that Council endorses the schedule of ordinary meetings to be held in 2024 as follows. And the information, just on this one, councillors are very aware of our other communities, not just Bright. You'll see that there are positions here for 2 meetings in Myrtleford and 2 in Mount Beauty. And could you scroll down, please? That gives some indication as to why some meetings don't actually fit in the order of the last Tuesday of the month. So could I have a mover and seconder for those, please? Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Prime. Seconder? Councillor Kelly. Any commentary on these?
I'd just like to make a quick thank you while she's in the room. Mary Pike is probably the person who gets the biggest turnouts courtesy of her, we get big turnouts at the Mount Beauty meetings, which is really appreciated. So I think it's good that we make an effort to be over there and other parts of the Shire as well. So thank you to Mary and the UKVCA.
Any comments, Councillor Kelly? No? I'll just make one comment, and that's a bit of a plug, and that is that the CEO and the Mayor do meet in all the townships on the Friday morning prior to a council meeting. It will be published as to where those meetings are going to be held, and you can have a one-on-one 15-minute session. We've allocated between 9 and 10, not 9 and 10 slots, but we've allocated between 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock in the morning for those people who wish to come and actually, people that may not wish to question in a council meeting like this. Any other commentary on this one? No? I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour, please. Thank you. That is carried. And I should say unanimously because we do have a... Yes, thank you. 9.2, the Director of Customer and Community, Ms Helen Havercroft. 9.2.1, Bright Valley Development Community Views. Thank you, Ms Havercroft.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This report outlines the views expressed by the community to Council from February to October 2023 regarding stages 1 and 2 of the proposed residential subdivision known as the Bright Valley development. The purpose of this report is to ensure those who provided this material better understand the process and how development proposals on the land are being assessed. In 2005, the subject site, along with land on the northern side of the Great Alpine Road, were identified through the Alpine Residential Land Review as the preferred area for urban growth of Bright in order to facilitate additional residential development. On the 20th of January 2011, Amendment C15 to the Alpine Shire scheme was approved by the Minister for Planning. The amendment identified the subject site and the land to the north of the Great Alpine Road as Urban Growth Area 1, Great Alpine Road and Stacky Gully Road, Bright. On the 6th of August 2015, Amendment C34 to the planning scheme was approved by the Minister. The amendment rezoned the subject site from farming zone to general residential zone, applied a development plan overlay to the land and included Schedule 3 to that development plan overlay. Preparation of a development plan is a requirement of the DPO in order to coordinate development or subdivision before a planning permit can be granted. Generally, the DPO prevents the granting of permits under the overlay before a plan has been approved, and any permit granted must be generally in accordance with the approved development plan. A development plan provides a framework for how the various land uses and infrastructure required to support the future residential community will be developed and located. Council previously resolved to approve a development plan for the subject site at the Ordinary Council meeting in July 2022. Where a DP is approved under the development plan overlay, an application for a planning permit is exempt from the usual notice and third-party review rights available to members of the public. A planning application for stages 1 and 2 of the development was received by Council in October 2022. The application is for a residential subdivision of 78 lots. Council will consider this application further in an agenda item this evening. In the interest of transparency and given the significant community interest in the development of the site, Council provided material on its website regarding the proposals. For those who wish to provide comments or queries to Council, we provided some text about why we were providing that information and under what piece of the Act. Council received more than 200 submissions from February to October 2023. The main themes identified in the submissions relevant to the proposal covered 21 broad areas. A petition was also received on the 28th of February 2023 that contained 118 signatures. Subsequent to that March meeting where Council noted the signatories, Council continued to receive further material containing approximately 4,000 total individual signatures which related to the same petition which had already been responded to by Council. A further 700 signed pro forma letters were also received by Council. Community members organised an online petition which has to date attracted 27,418 online signatures. This petition does not meet the Council's governance rules and has not been formally recognised by Council. Council officers have prepared this report to ensure that those who provided this information better understand the process. So the 21 broad themes are covered in the fuller response to the application that was presented for stages 1 and 2 and will be discussed in a little bit more detail later on. So this evening the recommendation for Council is that Council receives and notes the views expressed by the community to Council regarding the proposed Bright Valley development along the Great Alpine Road.
Thank you. Councillor Hughes, Councillor Nicholas. Councillor Nicholas.
So this paper shows just how much care and concern there is in the community about the development that is proposed on the edge of Bright. I think it's been terrific to have people express their concerns so clearly to the Shire and have some capacity to get an answer back. You might not like the answer, but it's an answer based on the planning scheme and the planning process. And part of what I wanted to say tonight is that because you've engaged with us, because you've given us your concerns or told us your concerns, we've been more able to recognise what they are so that in the process of moving forward, those concerns can be addressed. It also helped formulate, for me anyway, personally, questions and to seek more advice and expert advice. So to make our decision, we have to base it on expert advice because we're not experts across this table, and to be pointed in the direction of information that we'd need to have to be able to respond to the community concerns has been really helpful. So I wanted to thank everybody for their input from the community to help us work out where we need to be looking for extra information and where we need to be looking into the future. I also wanted to thank, while I've got the chance, the Alpine Shire officers who responded, the consultants who responded, and my fellow councillors who have read an enormous amount of material to be able to be part of this decision tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholas. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think on this one, I just wanted to make and point out very clearly that this was an application that was called in by council to make a decision. This was under delegation not to have to come to us to make a decision, and the reason that we pulled this in for community views is because we wanted the community to be able to come on this journey, not be shocked by what's put out there, so that they can form opinions, make views, and allow us to have the view of yourselves and us, because we are community members here as well, to be able to talk to and negotiate with the group and the developers of the sentiments that lay behind the people and the faces that we walk past in the street, and that people will be walking past in the street when they and if they develop this land. So I just wanted to thank everyone, as I did earlier in the meeting, of the processes to date. And as we've said, you know, it hasn't always been an easy process. There has been heated conversations. There's been a lot of emotion involved. But acknowledging the fact that there has been various viewpoints put forward, that has allowed us to continue those conversations with the developers moving forward in order to make any decisions on this one. So thank you for the community views, because it's also forming part of the process of other development or future plans of what it is that we want to do here in the Alpine Shire as a whole, and not just Bright. And it's also been a learning process for us in the ways that we want to communicate with the community, and the best ways to do that as well. So thank you for allowing us to continue through this process the way we have.
Any other comments on this particular item? Yes, Councillor Kelly.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I think fellow councillors have made some really strong points around this process that's been undertaken as, you know, not a consultation process for deciding the application, but a way to provide comment and feedback. The other, I think, benefit of this is that that comment and feedback has landed with a project proponent who has taken an interest in what the community has provided feedback on, and you know, that was the benefit of being noisy, being loud, getting petitions, and putting those cases forward. You know, that direct channel to the actual project proponent rather than council itself.
Thanks, Councillor Kelly. Any other comments, Councillor? No, Councillor Janis? No. Councillor Keeble, you're fine. Thank you. And I'll just concur with the three councillors that have spoken. Councillor Nicholas is quite correct. We are not experts. We're not planners. We're not strategic planners or statutory planners. However, questions from the general public have honed our questions to the officers and made them more accountable. And I think the discussions have been a lot more robust. And I also believe that because of that, I think that the outcomes are going to be the best outcomes that are achievable with this particular application. Okay, the recommendation is that Council receives and notes the views expressed by the community.
Mr Mayor, could I just have a right of reply?
Certainly, you can have a right of reply. Thank you, Councillor.
Or it's more actually an addition and a bit of a summary. So, yes, I agree. But
yes, certainly.
I just wanted to note that most of the engagement that we've got in this report, in fact all of it, is from people who don't want this development to happen. There's been people who approach me in the street, and I know other councillors who actually do want the development to happen. So I just thought that was really important to put across that although this paper's mostly about what's wrong with it, there's a lot of people who think that there's stuff right with it too.
Thank you, well pointed out. Can I just put that to the vote then, this recommendation that we receive and note those submissions from the general public? Thank you. That's carried. Right. 9.2.2. A planning application, P2022.150, Great Alpine Road, Bright. Thank you, Ms Havercroft.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This is a rather long report, so please bear with me if I have to flip between pages to get the story across and jump in when you've heard too much detail. So the proposal this evening is the application proposes a subdivision of land into 78 lots, the creation of an access to a road in a Transport 2 zone, roadworks within a land subject to inundation overlay, and the removal of native vegetation. The application proposes a revised staging than that which was identified in the development plan that was approved by Council on July 2022, in that the central avenue that follows an existing row of cottonwood poplars is to be brought forward from stage 8 to stage 1 and will form the main entrance to the development from the Great Alpine Road. This will result in the eastern access point to the Great Alpine Road, which was proposed in the development plan to be a stage 1 access, being delivered at a later stage and subject to a future permit application. The internal road network includes a variety of street topographies, including the main access avenue and local access roads with varying cross-sections. It includes pedestrian and bicycle movements, and there's also a footpath provided for all road reserves and an off-road shared path. The central monocline open space is also proposed to form part of Stage 1. Additionally, a portion of what is identified as Stage 4 in the development plan is also proposed to be brought forward to Stage 1. Varying lot sizes are distributed throughout the subdivision, with larger lots proposed on the western side of the monocline where the land is steeper, and smaller lots proposed to the east of the monocline closer to the Great Alpine Road where the land is generally flat. In relation to open space and landscaping, a landscape master plan was submitted with the application, which sets out a landscaping vision for the site. The application proposes a staged drainage system for stages 1 and 2, which includes a sediment detention basin to be constructed as part of stage 1. These basins are in the same location as approved by the development plan. Native vegetation removal is proposed in the form of 3 scattered trees, due to the applicant indicating these trees are incompatible with the development. These trees are clustered together centrally within the site. Removal of less than half a hectare in this location is deemed not to have a significant impact on any habitat for rare or threatened species. The subject site and surrounds. The land has been predominantly cleared for grazing, with the exception of 2 perpendicular rows of cottonwood poplars through the centre of the site and the southeastern boundary. Vehicle access to the land is provided via 2 informal access points from the Great Alpine Road and 1 informal access point from Tower Hill Road. The land immediately to the south-southwest is a timber plantation owned by HVP Plantations. Restrictions. There is a covenant listed on the title which restricts the construction of any buildings, structures or obstructions over 2 metres wide sewerage easement adjacent to the north-eastern boundary of the site. The proposal provides a minimum 3 metre offset from the north-eastern boundary to the closest building, which is well clear of the restricted area. A driveway is proposed over the restricted area, but North East Water raised no issues when they were referred. Aboriginal cultural heritage. The applicant proposed an approved cultural heritage management plan as part of the application. Council sought legal advice which confirmed that the CHMP did reasonably cover the proposed permit application. In relation to works associated with the intersection on the Great Alpine Road, the legal advice noted that no planning permit is required for the intersection works. Therefore, there's nothing preventing Council from issuing a planning permit in response to the permit application prior to a CHMP for the intersection works being approved, if it is determined that one is required. As previously discussed, public notification. The Bright Western Gateway Development Plan, version 6, June 2022, was adopted by Council in July 2022. Therefore, this application is exempt from the notice requirements. Notwithstanding the above, the application has been made available in accordance with public availability requirements of the Planning and Environment Act 1987, by placing a copy on the Council's website, and a number of submissions that were received from Council members responded to the information that was being provided on our website. So as we had in one of the questions earlier, how does the process for making a determination work? There was a detailed planning assessment undertaken. I don't intend to read out all of the information that sits in here, but we commenced with a municipal planning strategy and the planning policy framework, which covered items that included settlement, environment and landscape values, the built environment and heritage, supply of urban land, growth areas, regional and local places, landscapes, bushfire, floodplain management, contaminated and potentially contaminated land, subdivision design and healthy neighbourhoods, neighbourhood character, Aboriginal cultural heritage, and then the zoning and the land use. So the land is zoned as General Residential Zone Schedule 1, and it is a site that has a development plan overlay Schedule 3. The proposed subdivision has been assessed against the requirements of the approved development plan and is broadly consistent with the requirements and its strategic intent. The officer's recommendation proposes that the overall proposal is considered to be generally in accordance with the development plan. So I'm going to run over some specific, I think the three probably main areas that have been issues that have been discussed throughout. So the three key areas for consideration are focused on the proposed intersection with the Great Alpine Road, bushfire risk and land contamination. So the proposed Great Alpine Road intersection, the Great Alpine Road abuts the subject land on its north and northeast boundary and is considered locally as the gateway to Bright. The Great Alpine Road trees are recognised as critical in order to protect the character, amenity, landscape and biodiversity values the trees provide to Bright. Despite these recognised values, the development plan has anticipated an intersection with the Great Alpine Road in the same location proposed by the permit application, therefore recognising that some impact to the Great Alpine Road trees would be allowed for the intersection. The intersection proposed can be described as a modified T intersection, which includes left and right turn lanes out of the site, a short left deceleration lane to turn into the site, and a right-hand storage lane to allow vehicles to store and turn right onto the site. Council officers have continually raised concerns in relation to the potential impact on the trees and consistently sought clarification in regards to exactly which trees will be lost and/or impacted. Whilst ideally Council would have a clear understanding of the tree loss and impact prior to recommending the issue of a permit, the circumstances of being able to clearly understand the impact have been challenging to establish, including conditions that limit the number of mature trees allowed to be lost, requirements to protect the tree root systems during construction, and the ongoing health of the trees provides for a practical way forward to ensure the gateway to Bright and its amenity, landscape and biodiversity values are protected. Bushfire risk. The applicant submitted a bushfire report which Council has had peer reviewed by a bushfire expert. The peer review provided a detailed assessment of the proposal, including a timeline of relevant bushfire policy. The timeline sets out the evolution of bushfire controls and how they have been applied to the site, the subject land, over the past 10 years. It's clear from the chronology of events that the applicant's bushfire assessment that was lodged as part of the permit application makes the assumption that the development plan process addressed the requirements of clauses 13.02s. However, the requirements of that clause were not satisfactorily addressed as part of the approved development plan. The peer review concluded that whilst bushfire had been considered throughout the decision-making process associated with the approved development plan and subsequent permit application, key considerations of bushfire planning policy have changed throughout the process. As such, careful consideration must be given to the current bushfire policy and implications of future development on the subject site. Land contamination. Council requested that a preliminary site investigation and desktop hydrological assessment be undertaken on the subject site as part of the permit application to determine the suitability of the site for future sensitive uses, including residential development. The report concludes that only contaminating activity on the site is the historical use of pesticides on tobacco crops approximately 40 years ago. A soil investigation was completed by the applicant and concluded that contamination associated with previous site activities is unlikely to pose an unacceptable risk to human health, and the site has medium potential for contamination, and a preliminary risk screen assessment, a PRSA, was recommended to be undertaken. and that forms part of the conditions presented this evening. In conclusion, it's considered the permit application delivers an appropriate planning outcome that is consistent with the Alpine Planning Scheme, including the approved development plan, subject to the conditions set out on the permit.
Thank you. Councillor Nicholas has moved that. Could I have a seconder, please? Thank you. Councillor Janus.
Mayor, just a point of order. I have an alternative motion I'd like to move. When will be the optimal time to introduce that?
We should discuss this one. Sorry, Councillor Kelly. Unless you withdraw. Do you wish to withdraw your recommendation for this one? Will the discussion be any different, Councillor Kelly, to what we are going to discuss or not?
That's hard to speculate on.
It is very hard to speculate on that,
hard
isn't
to
it?
speculate.
Sorry, we have a mover and a seconder. I'll ask Councillor Nicholas to talk.
So I'm going to take a really high-level introduction.
Yep, thank you.
Yep, I just put my speaker back on, and so sorry. I'm going to take a pretty high-level sort of introduction place. I've got 5 minutes at this point in time, and I hope answer some of the questions a little bit more fully that were asked from the floor earlier. There's a whole lot of information in the paper that people might have read in detail or might have just glimpsed over or not read at all. But I just wanted to start off with the whole process. So in 2005, there was a future residential study done. In 2011, it was put into the planning scheme. 2015, it was turned into rezoning, which is when the development plan overlay was put in place. In 2017-18, the clause 1302, which is the bushfire clause, was introduced to the planning scheme, and it wasn't until 2022 that we started working on the development plan. In fact, we probably started in 2020, but it was approved in 2022. So there's some pretty big changes in what was required for bushfire from when the first formal strategic document was put into planning scheme to when we were working on the development plan, and now we're subsequently working on the first subdivision permit that comes under the development plan. And so some of the people who are saying, why can't we do it all at once, and how come we're just looking at this little part of it when there's a whole lot more to do? The development plan outlines what else is coming. And I guess the critical thing to think about is that development plan overlay, the first part, was very high level, not much detail. The development plan gets a bit more detail, and the subdivision plan is where the detail comes in that actually shows what it's going to look like. So that's where we're at the moment, and we can, as Ms Evercroft said a couple of times in her answers to the questions, we're making a decision based on the permit that's in front of us tonight, and they're seeking permission to have a subdivision stages 1 and 2 that is generally in accordance with the development plan, which it is. So the requirement isn't that it's exactly the same as the development plan. The requirement is that it pretty much follows what the development plan's intent was. So that's what we're assessing tonight. I've already mentioned how much time and effort goes into this, and how much expert advice is brought into it. But at every single stage of the decision process, there's advice from experts that the Alpine Shire Council officers provide, and that comes from external people. And we have a lot of debriefing sessions, and we have a lot of discussion, and we have a lot of input from community members to work out what we think is the best outcome given the situation that we've got. So the other thing that's really important to take into the consideration is that each time there's a decision made on each level of this planning process, it can only be made with the best available knowledge that's contemporary at the time. So it's really, sometimes you can use some modelling, but you can't second guess it. You can't imagine what might happen and make a decision based on that. You can only make your decision based on what you've got in front of you and the decision information that you've got that basically comes from the planning scheme. So today's question is about whether this subdivision is a good planning outcome for the Alpine Shire. And Ms Havercroft's gone through, and the paper shows a list of all the things that we've had to consider to demonstrate that we've assessed it against the planning scheme, which is the way that you the first step in working out whether it's a good planning outcome or not. Some of the other things that have been raised in the discussions with the community and tonight are about social and community infrastructure, and why can't we get that in place before we get anything happening on the ground? And I guess a lot of that isn't actually work that the Alpine Shire can do. It might be the school, it might be the hospital, it might be the medical centre. And there's no doubt that the people who are involved with those organisations and that community infrastructure know that this development's coming. So they've started working towards how to manage it in their own way. And the other thing that's really important to think about is that this is the first step of probably a 9 or 10 years worth of development, as I think Enzo pointed out. And so it's not going to be a huge impact on population immediately. So there is time for some of these processes to get into place and to come up with the best outcome that we possibly can, given the contemporary understanding that we have and our knowledge. And I just wanted to finish by asking a question about why was the entrance from Havercroft, if she can, why was the entrance road moved from the east and Stacky Gully to the Great Alpine Road? Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholas. I can't really answer that question because it was for the developer and the applicant to determine which stages they wanted to present to us for consideration, and they amended from the development plan which stages they were putting forward first, and that included a movement away from the Stacky Gully edge of the site to a more central area, which then brought into the conversation the Great Alpine Road intersection.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholas. Councillor Janis, I won't keep you to 2 minutes, but yeah, dot points.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholas. I couldn't have put it any better than myself. I know that you have a planning background and acknowledge that, so you've gone through most of those points. I think back within our community here and within the Alpine Shire, so there is we know that there's a housing shortage. We know that we have to continue to build housing. We have to plan into the future, so we have our land development strategy for the whole of Shire. And so back in, as you say, back in 2005, this area was deemed suitable for housing. It's gone through all the whole process with the minister. It's been changed. You know, we've had some developers come in to build some houses for us. One of the big things that the developers, I think, have to deal with is the change of the bushfire rating to BAL 29 from 12.5. And I think if it almost adds a whole fire protection area on that side of Bright with the type of building that has to be put there. But I look at the whole area in Brighton. When you look at from an aerial view, the township of Brighton itself, with the surrounding pine forests, I wonder with new development going forward at any one time now is going to end up being a BAL 29 building under the new guidelines with CFA. and I don't know whether there's any wriggle room for that at all. You know, the adjoining areas, not Wally's Lane, that's in Middleford. Stacky Gully and this Walker's Lane. Yeah, so they're all very heavily treed areas. I was concerned, and I know Leanne and her crew have done a lot of work on the trees, and when the movement came from the road to go from Stacky Gully into the trees, my first thought was, how many trees are we going to lose there? And I acknowledge the fact that they are a beautiful avenue of mature trees. And, you know, but I also acknowledge the fact that we have to continue development. The developers have assured, and through their landscape plan, of putting in a number of suitable trees, or most of them are suitable. I think the Ace and the Gunda could bite the dust, quite frankly. I'm sick of pulling them out of the rivers because they spread where they shouldn't. But anyway, that'll be part of the conditions, I'm sure. So there's a 50-metre buffer zone from the Great Alpine Road around the edge of that development, which is suitable for public use, for kicking the footy, but I would be concerned if small children are running onto that road as well. So it's not a fenced boundary per se, although there is some hedging there. But under supervision, it is a usable, quite a large usable area. So this is only stage 1 and 2, and we can only look at what we have before us tonight. And I know there is another number of hectares that need development, and it will be up to the developer to deal with whatever authority there is, making their point of view about what has to happen for a house before a house can go up in any of those areas. So that's not council's bother here tonight necessarily. We have to look at what we have here tonight so that the developer has got some way forward or some way back, depending on what the result of tonight's discussion is. I think they've done their best to work with community to put up something that is suitable for the Bright area in particular, because the housing that the bits that I see as being presented to us with some catalogues and that, they look like quality type homes. You know, it'd be nice to have some other affordable housing, but that is not the developer's role. I think we need to talk to our state members of parliament in relation to that.
Thank you, Councillor Janus. Councillor Kelly, I believe you'd like to. And as you've noticed, I'm letting the conversation run free.
I was going to remark on the 2-minute limit there.
No,
Councillor Janus, I feel it's a
making a point of that.
It's a loose requirement.
Making a point of that.
Look, for the most part, I largely concur with Councillors Nicholas and Janus, particularly around the juncture we've arrived at and the process to get here. You know, there's been a reflection of the time frame and the process that's been gone through. And if you look at the time frame, you know, much of this is around turning what is a concept into a reality. And through that journey from concept, the idea is you get to a point of less uncertainty, in fact, certainty about what's going to play out. So 2015, rezoned, some pretty specific things in there. Concepts, again, around, you know, avoiding inefficient use of existing or future infrastructure, avoiding leapfrogging development, and also there's some pretty specific things in there about, you know, a development plan needs to accommodate the bushfire management overlay and that bushfire-prone area represents. So that was 2015. 2017, change of state government, change of policy, and this has been reflected, I think, in the officer's report. We had an incoming government that clearly set out a change in tact, and that the key point in that, in the Victorian planning policy framework, is prioritising the protection of human life over all other objectives. And underneath that it says, directing population growth to low-risk locations and reducing the vulnerability of communities through bushfire mitigation measures. Interestingly, our Alpine planning scheme also has something pretty similar now. And in there at Clause 13, it actually says, we will avoid development in any location that's above a BAL 29 rating. Keep that number in your head. So I think when I then turn to where we are today, we're actually in a pretty interesting position because I feel for the developers because they've put out they've got a development plan, they've put in their first subdivision, and that was predicated around a BAL rating of 12.5. 12.5, the lowest risk part of that 40-hectare site. And for me, the risk is pretty significant from a certainty perspective because at the 11th hour, the CFA said BAL 29. So my difficulty with this site is that, we now have the first couple of stages that are a BAL 29 rating. That's the highest we're allowed to go in our Alpine Shire. And we have known higher bushfire level risk in the other parts of the site, particularly the upper terrace. So my concern or reservations around this subdivision is, because I think aesthetically it's great, we need more housing, is that we're in a position where there is a great degree of uncertainty as what could follow after this, really uncertain for the developer, really uncertain for the community. It's pretty undesirable. So in my view, and where I look at actually what the development plan required versus what is now proposed, alternative roads, a BAL rating that was not anticipated, we actually have, to me, a subdivision that is not consistent with the development plan or not generally in accordance. I think, my view is that actually we need to huddle down with the CFA, the developer, the council officers and work out a more robust view on what the future bushfire rating of that site is, because the very first development, which is in the lowest risk area, is already capped out at what we're allowed to build at. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. Other councillors? Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm just literally going to brain dump for you. So, first of all, there are other areas in our town that have been developed that are at a much higher bushfire risk than what we're looking at for these stages 1 and 2, which is what we're making a decision on tonight. So, at this point in time, the next stages are not guaranteed. We are making a decision on what is put in front of us, which is stages 1 and 2. So, I suppose one of the concerns that was pointed out was the usable space along the Great Alpine Road and how, if that is being used by people, how close it is to the road and the impact that could have. And I'm just putting it out there that the bike track is actually closer to the Great Alpine Road in many various spots along the Alpine Shire. So I'm not sure whether that weighs a point. The developers have their opinions on how they want to develop their land. Just like if you've got a block in Paulpunka and you want to put a house on it, there are decisions that you want to make based on what it is that you want to develop. So what we are making a decision on here isn't necessarily about the itty-gritties of affordable housing and things like that. That's not our space to make them put those in, because in all honesty, there's a house, 2-bedroom unit in Paulpunka on a very small block of land for $750,000. And if anybody thinks that's affordable housing, then we need to have some conversation about that. It's really hard. Us as councillors sit in a position where we've got policy and regulation and our processes, and then we've got community sentiment, best future planning for what it is that we have here in the Alpine Shire. And a lot of these decisions were made back in 2015, and we need to work through what that looks like and the changes that have happened in this process. So I think to some of the points that have come to us as councillors, obviously the trees and the root system. So there's been a lot of conversation around what and how many trees will be moved or removed. And then in the reports themselves talk about the asymmetric root distribution and how the impact on removing those trees might have on the future trees. And I suppose I have a question of, there's a condition there to monitor and have a management plan for 5 years. A monitoring and management plan is keeping a close eye on what happens to the trees. However, removing those 2 trees, at what point is this a fluffy condition where you're just going, well, it could be 8 years' time that they would develop, systems where things are going to go downturn and more of those trees will be removed. But then on the other hand, you've got to sit there and go, are they putting in more trees, more infrastructure, creating a better avenue, working on what that looks like to future-proof what this looks like for generations to come as well? And I suppose the biggest question I actually have is around the PRSA. One of the conditions is that must be conducted and, I suppose, put forward to the satisfaction of council prior to any works commencing. Ms Havercroft, can you confirm that this means that any works, and that includes roadways, removal of trees and all of that before any works continue?
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. So condition 5 is prior to the commencement of work. Some things have to happen. One of them is that the PRSA is completed to the satisfaction of the responsible authority, and I can confirm that before the commencement of work is any works at all, that would include the roadways. So yeah, it doesn't. You can't start building the roads.
Thank you. I suppose one of my last points is I am a born and bred Alpine Shire community member. I have watched and changed and seen so many different things in terms of development, change, likes, dislikes, arguments, applause when it comes to things that have happened here in the Alpine Shire. The amount of people that have moved here because it is such a beautiful place, and just making a point that a lot of the people that moved here have developed their own land. They've continued to grow our community. And what I see in terms of growth in our community has been a really good future prospect for what it is that we have to offer in so many different ways for people visiting as well as living here. Growth and change is inevitable. It's how we manage that and how we progress through that that I think needs to be considered, and that's what these types of subdivisions play in part. But today we are making a decision on stages 1 and 2 on what's put in front of us, and that needs to be mindful that we're not making a decision on future stages. It's very pinpointed in this one, so there's my brain dump.
Thanks, Councillor Hughes. You got something left for later?
Oh, maybe.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Prime.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I feel like I'll probably just be rehashing a couple of things. I think Councillor Nicholas hit the nail on the head in the previous agenda item in that we're not experts and we rely heavily on information given to us, and I can assure the public the amount of conversations and really robust conversations we've had about this, because we're both councillors who have to make a decision as well as being community members who, a lot of us will just continue to live here for a long time, I presume, as well. So we're coming at it from both sides. And I do want to thank the council officers as well. I think a lot of hard work has been put into this. Hard work as well explaining to us how a lot of things work. It's a massive learning curve for us as well, again, not being experts. And as spoken about before with the community members, although they can't sway the decision, just giving us thought-provoking bits of things to think about, I think has been really helpful. And again, it's already been said tonight, we have to make a decision on what's presented to us today. And I think having gone through a massive learning curve myself with how the planning scheme works and how this works, I really understand how it's hard to wrap your head around, and all the questions from the floor, I completely understand where you're coming from, and it can be difficult to understand the process that has to be followed and why things work a certain way. And I do sympathise that can be quite tricky to understand. But that's why I do appreciate the questions as well. So I think we've touched on everything from bushfire overlay to the PRSA. So can I just clarify, Ms Havercroft, with the PRSA has to be completed as a part of this, and then if something was to show up on that, that would trigger something else that was required as well, correct?
Thank you, Councillor Prime. So, I'll read the condition out. So, prior to the commencement of works, unless otherwise agreed by the responsible authority, the owner must provide to the satisfaction of the responsible authority a PRSA which states that the level of contamination risk to human health on the site is suitable for the sensitive land use and development facilitated by this permit, and that an environmental audit is not required, or an environmental audit statement under the Act which states that the site is suitable for the use and development allowed by this permit, or an environmental audit statement which states that the site is suitable for the use and development allowed by this permit if the recommendations made in the statement are complied with. So once the PRSA has been satisfactorily completed, there could be further works that are required to satisfy us that the land is suitable for the development.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry. It's well worth a read, I would suggest, going through the report and looking at the layout of the conditions attached to it as well. It's a little dry, I will admit, but it's worth working your way through. So again, I want to thank everyone for coming here tonight, and the community interests. We understand that everyone loves living here, loves visiting here, and I feel like what we've strived for is the best outcome possible with what's presented to us tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Prime. Councillor Keeble.
Thanks, Mayor Forsyth. Just in regards to all of my colleagues and councillors, it's good to hear. So I'm getting double feedback, so I apologise if it's good to hear me. We know that this particular bit of land, we're looking back at 2005. Who would have predicted we would be here in 2023, where those things go to? I concur with all my councillors, but in regards to the CFA and what Councillor Kelly was talking about and the Bell rating, that's some of the areas that I've been concerned with. I think that a Bell rating of 29 is very problematic and worth of further discussion. And on a side point, for those people in the gallery and listening, the draft land development strategies is out if you're concerned about township boundaries and where residential zoning goes or may go in the future. It's a document that needs to be provided feedback on. And so we find ourselves now with the township boundary in Bright at the northern end of this development. What I'll also say is that over the journey, let's say since 2020, the officers in Shire have provided us with documents and answered our questions as best they can in honesty throughout the whole process. And I thank them for their work, the mammoth amount of work to get to where we are now. I think I'll leave it at that. Thanks, Mayor Forsyth.
Thank you, Councillor Keeble. Before I go back to Councillor Nicholas to wrap up discussion, there was an issue raised regarding Stacky Gully. So could I just get the CEO to give the audience just a bit of an update on where that actually is at the moment, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So there's a complex interface around Stacky Gully. The reason it's complex is because we have roadways, we have a waterway, and we have an interface with the developer's land, we have a power line, we have an interface with the Great Alpine Road, there's the Rotunda, there's Ashwood Avenue, so it's a pretty complex piece of infrastructure there. We've been working together with the developer since the approval of the development plan to try and establish what is the best outcome in that location. What is clear from the officers' recommendation tonight, the officers do not believe that there's a requirement to upgrade Stacky Gully in order to deliver stages 1 and 2 of the development of the site. What the future holds with future permit applications, we don't know. We're continuing to work with the developer on the basis that we collectively believe there's a mutual benefit to an upgrade to Stacky Gully. So we believe the developer has a view that there's a benefit to them, and we certainly have a view that there's a benefit to the community. So it's a complex interface. We're getting closer towards what a resolution might be, but at this point in time, that hasn't 100% been locked in place. Post-decision tonight, whatever decision council makes, we'll continue to work with the developer on establishing what the future might look like for Stacky Gully.
Just a question as well, Mr CEO, and that is anything to do with Stacky Gully, does that also feed into anything north of Great Alpine Road onto the river?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So that's part of the complex discussions. There's another landholder potentially will be engaged as part of this process on the other side of the river. There is the other side of the Great Alpine Road, forgive me.
Yep.
There is a proposal which has been discussed to straighten Stacky Gully and deliver it straight down into the Ovens River, which we think will provide a mutual benefit for the ratepayer and for the two landholders. We haven't worked it through. There's nothing confirmed in writing yet. We'll continue to work through with both of those developers to see if we can deliver the best outcome possible for our community.
Thank you. Councillor Nicholas.
Mr Mayor, do you mind if I ask 2 more questions? Briefly?
Yeah, very quickly.
Very quickly. Ms Havercroft, the future subdivision plans for this development, do council have the right to call those in each time they appear?
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Council can call in planning applications if they wish. So we have some guidelines around whether they would be community interest or not, and that's up to councillors to decide.
And my further question is if we are to grant or refuse this application tonight, can you confirm that this might not necessarily be the end, that there are ways and means in which our developers on this site specifically can actually take this further and it be determined away from what we decide tonight?
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. So if the recommendation as set out is adopted by council this evening, the applicant has the right to take that to VCAT to amend the conditions that are sitting in the permit application and the permit that's presented. And if council don't endorse the recommendation this evening, then similarly the applicant has the rights to take the decision of refusal to VCAT to ask them to make an alternative decision.
Are you clear?
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Nicholas.
Right. Good discussion. Thanks, everybody. I wanted to pick up really the growth and change that Councillor Hughes talked about. There's nothing more certain than change, and Councillor Prime talked about making the best of what we've got, changing it, managing the change so that it is the best outcome we possibly can for the most people. We need housing. We need safe housing, and that means egress from the area that the houses are built, so sound and safe access back onto the Great Alpine Road and Stacky Gully Road when that comes. We need safety from bushfires. That's what BAL 29 is. It's a risk mitigation approach to bushfire. It makes the houses safer for people to live in, and it makes it makes sure that there's defendable space so the houses can be defended. We also need safety from stuff left in the soils. So these things are in process. We also need energy efficient housing, and the proposal in front of us is for 8 star, which is terrific. It's above what's mandated by the governments above us. There's also some, and Councillor Kelly touched on this. There's some good concepts in the subdivision about connectivity and active transport. The houses do look quite nice in the pictures we've seen. We're yet to see them built, and if this gets through. And Couple more things. One is that the bell ratings, there's 6 bell ratings. There's low, where you don't have to do anything. There's 12.5, where you still have to do something. There's 19, there's 29, there's 40, and then there's flame zone. And you're actually allowed to build in 40 and flame zone if your house is spec'd appropriately. So regardless of what it says in our Alpine planning scheme, there is still capacity. I'm not for one moment suggesting that we should be putting people into the Bell 40 or flame zone area through a subdivision, because we are all concerned about the Bell 29 rating and what might happen if there was a bushfire, and so is the CFA, and so are the developers, and so are the people who are going to buy the places if it goes through. But I wanted to raise that because I think it's really important that we recognise that the prioritising human life, and this is another quote from the Alpine Planning Scheme, isn't just about keeping the bell ratings low. It's about to strengthen the resilience of settlements and communities to bushfire through risk-based planning, which is what we're looking at tonight. The last 2 things I wanted to talk about was that Councillor Keeble mentioned is the land development strategy, and how important it is to get your 2 bobs worth into that, because that's like what happened in 2005 and then 2011. So that's what starts to drive this process. And if you don't start thinking about it and talking about it now, it gets to be too late. And the other plan that's coming up that's just as important is the rural land strategy, and that will also indicate how the Alpine Shire develops into the future. So please put your thoughts into that. And I will leave it at that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Nicholas. And I'll just add to that, Mount Beauty Market this Saturday morning, there is a pop-up that will be fronted by council officers as well as a couple of councillors to discuss things such as the land development strategy. Right, crunch time. The proposal is that council issues a planning permit for the staged multi-lot subdivisions, as we have discussed tonight. Could I have a show of hands, please, for that planning permit? Those in favour? Those against? That has been carried, not unanimously. Division?
Thanks, Mayor. Yep.
I will call a division. Those in favour? Councillors Nicholas, Councillors Hughes, Janus, Forsyth, Prime and Keeble. Those against? Councillor Kelly. Thank you. Thank you all, one and all, and thank you for persisting through that in the gallery. Thank you. 9.2.3, Mystic Park Licence Agreement. Director Rees has a conflict of interest, and Councillor Rees will leave the chamber at 7:27.
He's doing minutes as well.
Is he?
Alan, you departing?
Yeah.
Ms Havercroft will be presenting this particular item. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just try and find the recommendation to pop up on the screen. No, just zoom past. Thank you. This report relates to the establishment of a sustainable operating model for Mystic Park. Alpine Community Plantation Inc, ACP, was incorporated in 2013 as a community-based, not-for-profit partnership between Alpine Shire Council, HVP and 3 community groups being Alpine Cycling Club, North East Victoria Hang Gliding Club and the Brighton District Chamber of Commerce. ACP is governed by a volunteer board representing each of the member organisations that forms part of the partnership. This recreational management in a working pine plantation has had a focus on mountain bike activity, principally known as Mystic Park, covers approximately 400 hectares, contains more than 50 kilometres of trails across 84 separate trails, including flow, climbing, downhill and technical mountain bike trails. Mystic Park has experienced a period of rapid growth since 2016, following the opening of the Hero Trail in December 2016 and Shred Kelly's Last Stand in December 2018. An assessment carried out in 2022 showed that Mystic Park was estimated to attract approximately 58,000 visitors to the Alpine Shire each year, contributing an estimated $27.1 million into the local economy and supporting 227 local jobs. The success of Mystic Park is a testament to the vision of the founding members of ACP and the hard work and commitment of the volunteer ACP board members over the last 10 years. The licence agreement between HVP and ACP expires on the 23rd of December 2023. Council officers have explored collaboratively with HVP a number of alternative governance models for Mystic Park beyond the 23rd of December 2023. The remaining available option to secure Mystic Park's future is for Alpine Shire Council to commit to assuming governance and operational management responsibilities for the park via a licence agreement with HVP. This is in light of Council being recognised as being best positioned to ensure the governance, financial, operational, stakeholder and risk management responsibilities for the benefit of the Alpine Shire community. Some issues have been raised as we've gone through this work. So a risk assessment was undertaken and it broadly focused on three things: the likelihood of injury in the park and the responsibilities that might fall to the council in that regard, bushfire risks, and the loss of trails from harvesting. That being the most significant operational risk that's presented at the moment is the harvesting that's proposed in mid-2024 and late 25. Entering into a licence with HVP over Mystic Park will not introduce a new service into Council's overall portfolio. However, it will result in a significant expansion in the extent of the mountain bike trail network under Council's oversight. So another issue that, risk assessment was carried out. We also undertook a really detailed piece of financial modelling that utilised actual data from ACP's operations, including membership fees, and the benchmarking is also carried out against other similar mountain bike parks in Australia and beyond. The financial modelling has established that Mystic Park can be operated under a model which is financially sustainable, providing an attractive opportunity for a commercial operator at the same time as providing income to Council, which is sufficient to cover its costs relating to supporting the operations of Mystic Park and its relationship with HVP. To support the transition process from an ACP licence to a Council sub-licence with HVP, it will be necessary for Council to commit resources over the period through to mid-2024. The cost of these resources is estimated to be approximately $80,000, and this cost will be unbudgeted in the current financial year. Based on the financial modelling that has been completed, it is anticipated that once an operator has been appointed and the park has achieved steady state operations under the new operator, there will be no net cost to Council for this operation. So the comprehensive risk assessment and financial modelling have been carried out. Through this work, it's been established that committing to a licence with HVP and taking on governance and operational management of the park will change Council's risk profile. However, it is considered that these risks can be managed to an acceptable level by following best practice across the industry. Financial modelling has shown that the park can be operated sustainably without imposing an ongoing financial burden on Council. Extensive consultation has been undertaken with ACP and HVP to ensure alignment on future operating models for the Mystic Park. It is anticipated that the change in governance and operational management can be implemented without significant impact on the users of the park, especially important as we enter summer. So the recommendation this evening is that Council notes the findings of the Mystic Mountain Bike Park risk assessment and financial assessment, and authorises the Chief Executive Officer to sign all documents associated or necessary to give effect to a licence for the management of organised recreational and educational activities on HVP Plantations land in Alpine Shire over a licensed area of approximately 400 hectares for an initial period of 5 years with the option for a further 5-year term, and a licence fee commencing in year 2 at an annual amount of $6,400 CPI'd.
Councillor Hughes and Councillor Nicholas. Thank you. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, this is next. This is another one that we've dived into extensively. The research, the external providers who have given us statistics, the costs analysis, the discussions with public, the discussions amongst ourselves. This has been something that I think we have put so much time and effort into understanding where we move forward with this. Is this council's responsibility? Where I feel like when something doesn't go right and people want things to happen, it's always council's fault, whether we do it or whether we don't. There is always an onus where council need to step in to make things better and allow things to continue with what it is that we know. So I think the questions of, you know, is this what council should be putting their time and effort into? I suppose one of my questions, Mr. CEO, is do you feel confident that what is being put forward, that we have the capacity to actually pull this together and continue to service Mystic Mountain Bike Park?
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. As you've noted, we've done extensive work to try and establish what a robust operating model looked like, and I am very confident in delivering a really good outcome. I think we've got a world-class product here in Mystic Park. Like Helen said, testament to the work of ACP, so let's not overlook ACP. But there's also the volunteers from the Alpine Cycling Club who've put a lot of work and continue to put work in this park. But I think we've got a fantastic product, and I'm really confident that Council, working together with the community, we can continue to deliver that into the future.
Thank you. The financial modelling, I suppose, has showed that the park is going to operate in a sustainable manner and not put any financial liability on council for the continued operations. However, it does note that $80,000 from unbudgeted funds will be contributed from the council budget at the moment. Is that correct?
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. So ACP implemented a change to essentially charge users to access the park. Without that change, I don't think we'd be sitting here today recommending to Council that we could take on the park. My view is that the sector will move in that direction. They're keeping an eye on what's happening with Mystic Park, and I believe that's the way that the mountain bike sector will move into the future to mirror the model that's set up for the ski resorts. So that's allowed a sustainable income that allows Council the opportunity to take on this park and run it essentially cost neutral, cover its own costs. The $80,000 is the cost it's going to take us between now and handover from ACP to Council in order to put work into getting an expression of interest together, broadcasting that to the market, engaging with potential suppliers and assessing and essentially recommending award of a contract to get an operator into the park. So there is work that we need to do ahead of Council actually taking it on board, and that's the estimate, is $80,000 to have a resource working through that process between now and the handover.
Thank you. I think talking to the point where us as councillors stand here or sit here and make decisions based on a combination of things. So there's legal requirements, there's community input, there's policy considerations, and this is where Mystic Mountain Bike Park differs from something like a planning subdivision that we've just made a decision on, where there are further determining factors and bodies, I suppose, that could be making decisions regardless of what our decision outcome is. It can be taken further, whereas this type of thing is where we as council have a standpoint, and what we say here is what is going to determine where the future of this goes. So I suppose this is where my thinking hat goes on, where being a community member, you are listening to those that are in the cycling community, those that come to visit, utilising that cycling community, but you've also got your ratepayers and residents that have absolutely nothing to do with cycling, who also have a standpoint that this may or may not be a good point that council as a body or as an entity should be moving forward and putting their time and effort into. So just to put it into perspective, that these things aren't taken lightly, these things are discussed and decisions are made, and all of these things are taken into consideration when we move forward on making these types of decisions.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Councillor Nicholas.
Thank you. So, yes, everything that Councillor Hughes has said, as usual, and she asked my questions too. But part of the local government role is to facilitate economic development. And Mystic, as has already been said, has grown organically for quite a long time. When I first came up here in the early 90s on my what would now be called retro mountain bike, I rode around in the Mystic pine plantations, and it was pretty good, and there was single track in there and along the creek, Wandy Walk indeed. So definitely grown organically until recent times, and it's then taken off. But it's fundamental to the economy of Bright and the Alpine Shire as a whole. So it's not just the not just Bright that has mountain bike paths, trails. It's also Mount Beauty and Dinner Plain and Falls Creek. So people travel through the Alpine Shire to get to Falls Creek, and the other two places are in the Alpine Shire. So mountain biking is a rapidly growing sport, and it's an important part of our economy. Some of the documents and data that Councillor Hughes talked to include 63,000 visitors in 2022 to ride mountain bikes, and 18% of the membership, 18% of people who live in Bright are members of the mountain bike park at this point in time. There's a great variety of trails, and there's potential to grow, particularly after harvesting, and that's one of the things that people who ride mountain bikes say to me, is when the area is harvested, then there'll be some new trails, and that brings more excitement into the area, and it also brings people back. And in the financial modelling that we've seen, there's recognition that those trails will need to be rebuilt, and I reiterate what our CEO has already said, that there's cost neutral, so fully self-funded, so other people who live in Bright and don't want to ride mountain bikes aren't contributing with their rates to the park. It's self-contained. It is world class. I hear about it from all sorts of people from all over the world. Oh, you live in Bright? Wow, how's the park? So it brings people to the area, and I know not everybody wants people to come into the area, but one of the special things about mountain biking is that it's not 100% seasonal, so it helps to take the peaks and troughs out of our visitation, which is also good for our economic base. So the other comment that Councillor Hughes talked about other members of the public and the community members not really liking what's going on in terms of where the mountain bike park is, and it being so integrated into the town, I just wanted to make it clear at this point that there are works in progress to move the shuttling point and to change the access into the park so that it is more user-friendly for the people who want to just live in a quiet street in the outskirts of Bright. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Nicholas. I'd just like a couple of clarity points, and it's a pity we don't have Director Rees in here because he could answer them very quickly. The $80,000 resource is estimated. Would Council would the Alpine Shire be committing that kind of money through to mid-24 in the operation of Mystic Park or not, through ACP? Is this extra to what we would normally do? That's my question, I suppose.
Thank you, Councillor Forsyth. So Council has typically committed $12,500 a year as an operational contribution towards ACP. So that's year on year over the last 10 years. The time that the Director, Alan Rees, as the current chair, and our other representative commit to the board is essentially part of their role with Council, so it doesn't have a value assigned to it, although you could say that you're taking them away from another role that they could provide in Council. So essentially the $12,500 is really the commitment that the ratepayer sees towards, or has been seeing towards, Mystic Park. So the $80,000 is for us to get in a resource, because there's quite an intensive piece of work in putting together a proper expression of interest process and running that process. So it'll be an additional resource that we'll require in the team in order to work between now and hand over the park from ACP into Council, if Council was to take that decision.
Right. My other simple question is that I believe that we do know what HVP logging or their logging timetable is, and new trails are actually currently being built. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And what sort of timeframe are we looking at? Is it 2 years, 3 years? What sort of timeframe are we looking at?
Yes, that's correct. And new trails are actually currently being built. Is that correct? That's correct. I have a limited understanding, but I understand there are 4 or 5 trails currently being built on Emily Spur and due for completion in the near future. And those are to replace trails that were removed as part of the logging. And that will be the plan into the future, working collaboratively with HBP as their coops are logged. We will move in afterwards and rebuild the trails, so providing a new product as the harvesting moves through.
Thank you. Any other councillors got comments? Thank you, Councillor Kelly.
Thanks, Mayor. This is a little step away from roads, rates and rubbish, but I like the idea that there's a 4th R there in revenue. Every winter, the debate emerges, what's the best ski resort in Australia? Is it Thredbo? Is it Mount Buller, Hotham? We don't have that debate on mountain biking. Mystic is actually number 1, and the report that's attached to the papers tonight really demonstrates that. I think this is actually a pretty unique opportunity. This organisation's used to taking on complex challenges, and I have one question and I guess one emphatic point around the arrangement. The first question is, Ms Havercroft, it's a 5+5. Was there any appetite from the landlord to offer more durations, or why do you know why that was landed on as the sort of arrangement? Might be to
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. So my understanding was that was the term that was put in place for ACP, and it's been mirrored. So ACP was a 5+5, its relationship with HVP, and they've mirrored that from council's perspective. So it's sufficiently long to get an operator into the park, but it doesn't lock you into a long-term future that doesn't allow change down the track.
And I feel like the biggest risk with this licence opportunity is actually council engaging a satisfactory service provider to maintain the park. Can you talk a little bit about the market testing on that?
Thanks, Councillor Kelly. So you've named it there, the market testing. So we've done a fair amount of market testing. We're lucky to have an incumbent provider of some services in the park. So we've got a good understanding from one provider of their appetite to move forward potentially. We understand their costs and the services they're providing. But we've gone much broader than that and looked across the industry and engaged with quite a number of providers to test the industry's appetite based on the figures that we've put forward. So that's what gives us confidence that there is someone in the market who will see this as an attractive opportunity.
Great, and I think we've highlighted in the paper that cost neutral is the primary objective. I think being handed the opportunity to run this facility, actually, we should be. My recommendation is we pursue more than cost neutral. I think recruit a fiercely commercially minded, innovative person to manage the contract with the operator and see what we can do with this.
Noted. Thank you, Councillor Kelly.
Thanks, Councillor Kelly. Any other councillors? Tony. Tony's got his hand up. Thank you, Councillor Keeble.
Thanks, Mayor Forsyth. Another tricky one for tonight, and one that we've been working on for a very long time. I feel that the Shire has partly been backed into a corner on this one, in many ways from HBP. My concerns are around, I'm not convinced about the financial sustainability of this. I'm nervous about the next 5 to 10 years with the Shire taking it on a bit of land that we don't own or manage. We get someone in who a provider who runs it, and generally they're looking at shuttles. If other than outside of events, if e-bikes become the prominent bike, there are many people not requiring shuttles anymore, and so that avenue of income is decreased. Councillor Kelly talked about roads, rubbish and rates, and then revenue. We have other mountain bike parks in the Shire that Councillor Nicholas mentioned. Falls Creek and Dinner Plain are managed by entities. Mount Beauty is not, it is managed, it's managed by the cycling club there, Mount Beauty, Team Mount Beauty. So, you know, if Team Mount Beauty decides not to continue maintaining those, you know, mountain bike park over there, does the Shire jump in into a similar role? Then, you know, where does it stop in regards to Councillor Hughes' point about, you know, how much do we need to do? So I'm a bit nervous about it. I understand that there is an economic rationale for it. We have road bikes, we have rail trail, we have mountain bikes, and biking is certainly a major driver of tourism in the Alpine Shire. There's no doubt about that. I might leave it at that. There's been a lot of work, a lot of conversation. I'm a little nervous about it. I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Councillor Prime.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I completely see Councillor Keeble's points on this one. I'm not a mountain biker myself. I'm not a bike rider. I appreciate anything that gets anyone outdoors and doing stuff, though. I do think it would be a shame for Mystic not to exist anymore. And this has obviously been going on for a while. We've had many conversations about how this could play out and what the best way forward is, and does council have to step in, as Councillor Hughes touched on before. It'd be great to see us do it and do it really well, I think, and just be sort of trendsetters in this area. That would be quite... Is that good? Yeah, I'm okay with that. That would be a great outcome for this. If we... This might be directed to you, Mr CEO. If we can't find a satisfactory company to take over the management?
Thank you, Councillor Prime. So the arrangement that's proposed with HVP essentially would commit us to a sub-licence to the park. In the event that we couldn't find an operator, or that we found an operator and it just wasn't working out into the future, then council has the opportunity to not continue operating the park.
Thank you. That answered that very well. That's enough from me, I think.
Any other comments? Yep. Councillor Janus.
Thanks. With Councillor Keeble, I'm a bit concerned about this as well, with the risk to Alpine Shire in the long term. I was on council when this was first mooted, and there was, in my view at that time, it was almost forced upon us, being new councillors, not knowing the processes at that point. And we've put in a fair bit of money toward that park over the years. I think it's more than 120,000. I don't know what the figure is, but it's certainly more than 120,000 over that time. How confident are we in relation to protecting the amenity of the area? We've had a lot of problems with Mystic Lane and surrounds, and the behaviour of some of the users on our localised streets there. So are we putting something in place for that? Watchtower Road, I think, is being funded by some bushfire funding to be upgraded, to take it away, but will that Mystic Lane continue to be a thoroughfare for miscreant bike riders?
Thank you, Councillor Janus. So you correctly noted there that ACP secured some funding through the Black Summer Bushfire Fund, and ACP is working through a project to effectively relocate access into the park off Mystic Lane and onto White Star Road. So that work's due to be complete by Easter next year. We believe that will significantly address some of the amenity concerns that the local residents have raised. Time will tell, so we'll operate under the new operating model, and then we'll assess and we'll receive feedback from the community. And as we always do, we'll listen to that feedback and try and address concerns as they're raised. Can I guarantee that there'll be no amenity concerns? No, I can't. But what I can guarantee is that we'll work with the community to try and listen to their concerns and work with them to deliver a successful mountain bike park, but one that works in harmony with the local community.
Do our local bylaws officers have any controls in that area?
I'd have to pass on that one myself, but I'd defer to see if Director Havercroft has a response to that.
Thank you, Councillor Janis. So we have commenced looking into whether the local laws have jurisdiction within the park. So they do where we're a committee of management. They do where it's council land, where we own it ourselves. But the arrangements for this may require a further delegation of their authorised officer duties to make sure that they can administer amenity infringements, etc., if they were required in this bit of land.
Okay. Look, I acknowledge, there's... You all right?
Yeah, just getting us all back.
There are, I've spoken about some negatives in relation to this park, and I think they do need to be spoken about because, and I note that it is being cost neutral for council, so that our other ratepayers who are not, bike riders, etc., who don't participate in that sport are not propping up that sport or that recreational outdoor activity. But I also note that if they're riding down some of them black runs, whatever they're called up there, then there may well be other family members riding the rail trail while mum and dad or the big brothers out there running up the adrenaline. So the spin-offs, so I accept that there are spin-offs for the broader community. But we have an opportunity, if it's not working, we can just walk away from it. And if we don't, my understanding is if we don't make some form of decision tonight, then before Christmas, all those new mountain bikes that Santa might be bringing might be worthless.
Thank you for that. Could I get Councillor Hughes to wrap up, please?
Yes, thank you. Mr Jeremy, can you please confirm if this isn't carried tonight, when the current agreement is up, please?
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. The MOU between ACP and HVP expires on the 23rd of December. And HVP have advised us if Council is not willing to take a licence and take on operational management, then they will close the park.
Thank you, Mr CEO. So, kind of to a couple of points that were put here, we're not creating something from scratch, we're taking over the management of something. So if we were saying that we're going to put our hand up and build a mountain bike park, I think that would be a very different discussion. This is about something that's already in place that our community have embedded themselves in. I think it's really important to make a note that we have a point of difference here in the Alpine Shire as a whole, but with Mystic Mountain Bike Park, we've got the beautiful nature, we're getting people and children away from the screens. We live our life in front of laptops and iPads and TVs and things like that. We're constantly looking down, and this is, I think, a really good way forward that we can continue to work with the user groups of Mystic Mountain Bike Park and continue to teach these skills that people are actually travelling to come here because they can't experience that somewhere else as well. So this is where I myself would love, as a councillor, would love to continue to work with our youth groups about the possibilities of what the Mystic Mountain Bike Park can deliver now that if we make the decision, have a certain amount of control as to what this will look like and the modelling moving forward about how we use this space. So lots to think about, lots to discuss, but I suppose let's go to the vote.
That was going to be my suggestion. Right, we have two recommendations in front. The first one is just a noting and the second one is an authorisation for the Chief Executive Officer to progress a licence for the management. Could I have a show of hands, please? Those in favour of the recommendations? And I have actually a unanimous decision on that one. Thank you. Ms Havercroft, actually... Nathan, would you like to get Director Rees back in, rejoining our meeting at 7:58, please? Thank you, those that are leaving, and thank you for sitting through. We're nearly to the 3-hour mark. You've done exceptionally well.
There was a Viv. I think that might have been Viv.
Viv, yeah. Viv or Enzo.
Enzo, yeah.
Oh, here they are.
Viv,
Viv. You're going to have to
Bye.
pay for the paper.
We knew you'd stay, Mary.
Oh, Tony's having trouble. Tony's disappeared. He's left too.
Can you hear us, John?
Can you hear us?
Tony, can you hear us?
Maybe it's too wet.
Something's on TV.
I'm just noting here at 7:59 that Councillor Keeble is possibly not in the meeting at the moment. I will continue. 9.2.4, appointments of councillors to represent council on committees and boards. Due to the vote tonight, committee for the MAV, the Municipal Association of Victoria, traditionally it has been the Mayor. Over the last couple of years, I have actually had that role, even when I was not Mayor. The Councillor Keeble is back at 7:59. The Deputy Mayor currently is Councillor Simon Kelly. Would you stand as second in that position? Thank you. Hume Regional Local Government Network, Ralgan. I would still sit in that as the Mayor. Rural Councils Victoria, Councillor Nicholas, you're comfortable sitting on that. Councillor Keeble, you're happy to be second in Rural Councils Victoria. Thank you.
That's correct. Thank you.
Good. Scroll down. Upper Finance Committee. I have a question for, I think it's the CEO, actually, whether or not we do actually have a functioning Finance Committee, if you're leaving it there, or we're not going to do that at all.
Thank you, Councillor Forsyth. We do have a functioning committee, and my recommendation is you keep the committee here with nominations.
Thank you. Councillor Kelly, you're happy to sit on that one as well?
No, I don't wish to continue.
On the Finance Committee? Okay. I think it would be good to have two councillors on that. Is there a councillor that would like to sit on that? I will sit on that. But is there another councillor that would like to sit on the Finance Committee as well? Councillor Keeble, thank you very much.
Unless there's someone else? Was there someone else, sorry?
No, it's fine. Audit and Risk Committee, Councillor Kelly.
So that committee is going to continue to meet on a Friday after last week's meeting, discussed that, so I know Fridays are not great for everyone. I'm very open to someone else stepping into that, just in terms of current capacity.
Anybody else would like to put their hand up for Audit and Risk Committee? It meets every 3 months on a Friday morning. Councillor Janis? Councillor Janis, thank you very much.
Thanks.
All right, Alpine Resilience Partnership, Councillor Kelly, thank you. And Councillor Janis, you're still sitting on that, thank you. Alpine Children's Services, Councillor Hughes. Goulburn Murray Climate Alliance, you happy with that, Councillor Nicholas? Thank you. And the Reconciliation Action Plan Working Group, I'm not sure whether we actually still need a working group, simply because we do have an action plan in place. Is that correct? Do we still need to have a working group? I thought that was to get the RAP up and running.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So whilst we still have actions in the action plan that sits within the Reconciliation Action Plan, officers are comfortable for the working group not to have councillor representatives, and if we reconvene it, we'll bring it back to council to see if they would like to be a councillor.
Can we take that one on just...
remove it?
Yeah, we can look at that at a future date. Leave that one in abeyance. Thank you. Is there anything else on the next page?
L2P.
L2P, thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy to stay in there.
You're happy to stay on that? Yep. All right. Therefore, the recommendation is that councillors be appointed, groups of committee. Could I have a mover for as it stands? Thanks, Councillor Kelly. Councillor Janis. Sorry, Councillor Keeble, do you have something?
No, I was just seconding it. It's okay. Keep going.
All right. Yes, done. Thank you. Those in favour? Thank you. That is unanimous. 9.2.5, Dinner Plane Event Funding Program. I think we go back to you again. Thank you. Ms Havercroft.
It's just having a Councillor Janus problem with my speaker. Thank you, Mr Mayor. So this report relates to the recommended distribution of funding to support the events in Dinner Plane for the 23-24 financial year. You'll recall when we did the events funding previously that Dinner Plane was being split into two different rounds. At the first round, councillors endorsed the funding of one of the two applications that we had put in, and we did a second round, and I'm really pleased to say that it was actually much more successful. So we'll probably continue to do 2 rounds into the future. So as you can see in the report this evening, there was 4 applications and 4 recommendations to allocate funding to them. They're not all receiving what they were hoping to receive. So the recommendation is that the official opening Big Mustard Distilling Company receives a slightly less than they were hoping for, which brings it into line with events within the Valley where we feel it's a continuation of business, and they only received $2,000 as part of the funding. And the Dinner Plane Winter Markets, again, this aligns with the type of funding that was being received by other markets elsewhere. They actually received, so the Bright and others would receive $2,000, but Dinner Plane is just starting its market up, and we felt appropriate that we give them a little bit more to really provide that seed funding to hope that that is sustainable into the future. So we'll see what flows through for the following years. So the recommendation this evening is that we allocate the Dinner Plane funding as set out in the table there, and allocate additionally up to $25,000 for the Dinner Plane events budget to support the delivery of Dinner Plane Easter Festival and the snow season opening weekend. We have tried in the past to find local providers for these, that we hope the applications would have come through the Dinner Plane funding, but we have been unsuccessful. So again, the events team would take on the responsibilities of contracting out those 2 pieces of work to make sure that those 2 really key important events take place in the Dinner Plane, one for the community to enjoy, and that further they delegate authority to the Chief Executive to distribute the residual and unspent funds to the cumulative total of $60,000.
Could I have a mover and seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Nicholas and Councillor Prime. Councillor Nicholas.
It's terrific that Dinner Plane have come to the party and have thought up some new ideas for their funding, and I was also pleased to see that a private company isn't getting supported to do business as usual outside what we're doing with other people. So well done.
Councillor Prime.
Not too much from me. Happy to support this. This is great. Get up to Dinner Plane, have a look around. I think a lot of people don't realise it's part of the Alpine Shire, so...
You're not aware?
That's it. So get up there for a look. No, happy to support this.
It's just past Breakfast Creek. Any other councillors like to make comment on this funding? No, thank you. In that case, I shall put it to the vote. Those in favour? Thank you. That is carried unanimously. 9.3, Director of Assets, Mr. Alan Rees. You have no reports tonight. Thank you. Item 10, informal meetings of councillors. We have the 3 briefing sessions there. The recommendation is that a summary of those meetings just be received. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Kelly. Councillor Hughes. Any comments? No.
No, Mayor.
To the vote. Those in favour? Thank you. That is unanimous. Item 11, presentation of reports by delegates. Any councillors have a report?
No, there's one I'd like to give, but I'm not ready next time.
Thank you. Any other councillors as delegates? Yes, Councillor Kelly.
Mayor, I'll just mention the Alpine Resilience Partnership met earlier this month, actually at Mount Hotham this time round. It was a bus to support everyone participating and agencies getting to site there. Real focus on respective prep across the agencies for the summer resilience program. I think with a real focus not just on the physical preparation around our neighbourhood, but also on the mental health and wellbeing preparation for summer. And the last thing I'll mention is just to thank Councillor Janice did stand down as chair after I think a number of terms of chair of that group. And Steve Bally from the Mount Hotham Chamber of Commerce has joined myself as co-chair, and also Lara May from the Alpine Shire Council and Romina McEwen from VicPol are co-deputy chairs. Excellent. The four of us are catching up shortly. We've got a little agenda together. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other delegate reports?
Yes. Thank you, Mr Mayor. The Alpine Children's Services AGM was held 2 weeks ago, and it's really great. We've got a new board member that has joined us, so there's a diverse range of expertise that's sitting there. There is still vacant positions on that, and I feel like it just needs to be noted that some board members have been there for quite some time, and that we can't just guarantee that these people are going to continue to do these positions, especially when they're volunteer positions as well. So really, if it's something that you're wanting to shape the future of in the areas that you live, I really urge you to even reach out and just ask the question of what is involved, because it could be an hour of your time once a month, it could be an hour of your time once a quarter. All of those types of things need to be considered, and I think just by asking the question of what's involved, you'll get more of an understanding of where you might be able to deliver and help, I suppose, shape the future of what our services look like. But also, excuse me, just to applaud the staff at Alpine Children's Services that have faced some tough times in the last month or so, just with some things that have happened in the community, where they've really stepped up and made sure that they've had full support of the families that have been involved or affected by these events, and the backing of everyone involved, including community services where outreach is available for people to access. So I really just wanted to make a point that I'm really proud of the people that have been involved to be able to stand behind the community to support them through that. So thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hughes. Councillor Nicholas.
Perfect. Sorry, I will just talk briefly to the Goulburn and Murray Climate Alliance, because the last meeting I went to was the AGM, and I ended up as the Deputy Chair of the big group and the Deputy Chair of the Executive Committee.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. Narrowly missed out in that top spot. But what was really good, and that's part of the reason I was going to hold it back, is that we had a presentation from the CEO of VicGrid and a presentation from someone from AusNet, and they were both absolutely riveting, believe it or not, about transmission of electricity and how it works with renewables. And I'm supposed to be getting them, right, the overheads, and I'm supposed to be getting a card so I can pass it on, and maybe we get a same sort of thing for, because it was great.
I think that would be pertinent, and just block your ears, please, Councillor Kelly. I think it would be pertinent for other councillors in particular regarding Dettering. Thank you. Councillor Janice.
Yep. Thanks. Last week I went to the Municipal Emergency Management Planning Committee meeting, and I was a bit disappointed in the number of people that actually attended. A couple of the key agencies had meetings elsewhere, and they came in online for most of the meeting, I suppose. Anyway, we discussed the 72-hour program. Ms Van Heusen, our staff officer, had, and the CERA program, which Councillor Kelly might need to have a look at, with the Vic SES website. And the other thing is, if there's not a councillor there, I will get a representative to ask the committee if a councillor who no longer has a role in there under the new 2020 Act, unless you're the chair of the ARP, but could we have a councillor just present, even if there are no voting rights, just present at the meeting, just to sit on the side to see what is being discussed and what some of the issues are. So I did take away a very good comment from the Charlie Sexton from the SES, and he said, if you have a responsibility, you have to be in the room. So, no offence to you, Tone, out there.
He's in the room. 3 places.
You can see him.
Take your point, Councillor Janice. Is this something that is auspiced by the Alpine Shire operations, or is it?
Yes, it's an operational role.
Thing.
Yes.
So would it be then feasible for there to be an invite to councillors generally to observe? Is this what you're?
I think it'd be good to have an observer there. However, that'll be up to the committee to vote on.
All right. How often the meetings?
Quarterly.
Quarterly. Thank you. All right. Is that taken on notice? Thank you. Any other councillors that are delegates? No. Thank you. I'll do general business now. Item 12. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Mayor. Only just to acknowledge the support of my fellow councillors in appointing me Deputy Mayor tonight. I really acknowledge and appreciate the support, mentoring and opportunity. Thank you.
Councillor Prime.
I'll just do a quick congratulations to our returning Mayor and our new Deputy Mayor. So well done, everyone.
Thank you very much. Councillor Keeble.
Yeah, I would like to congratulate Councillor Forsyth on his mayoral journey for another 12 months. Congratulations. And I think when we had the vote, or prior to the vote, there was comments made about that all of us to fill both these roles. It's a matter of who's available, when and how we go. So thank you for the time and effort, because there is a lot of extra work as Mayor, and thank you for taking that up again. Councillor Kelly, thank you for taking on the Deputy Mayor role. For myself this year, I haven't been Deputy Mayor for a little while, so it's good to do that again. And I think it's it's a great role for every one of us to have a go at every 12 months. There's always a lot of learning that goes on, a lot of things to do, and I'm looking forward to where and what you will do in the next 12 months in that role, Councillor Kelly. So congratulations, that's terrific. And I think that was it. Maybe there was another one. I can't remember, but just thanks for everyone for coming tonight in the gallery. I wasn't there. That's what I'm thanking the ICT people for allowing us to have these hybrid meetings, because in years gone past you wouldn't be able to be at this meeting. So it was really important to be here, to hear the conversation from the gallery, to hear the conversation from my colleagues and from the senior management team before we make some votes. So being part of that is really important. Thank you.
Councillor Janice.
I went to a meeting today at the Myrtleford Recreation Reserve with the committee there, and it's something I'll take up with you. So it's about bin collections, status of the stadium there, who actually looks after it, etc. So there needs to be a little bit of clarity around that. I know I presented you with a document today from them. So the other big thing is the revisal of the booking form for events, whether it can be simplified, because they're getting more and more events held at that reserve, which is not our it's not our land, but they're getting more and more events there which they'd like to be registered. So perhaps it's something I can have a chat to you offline there. There was another matter and I meant to write it down and I've forgotten. That'll do.
Thank you. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Congratulations to yourself and Councillor... Sorry? and Councillor Kelly as well. That's, you know, it's another year where we can band together, work together, and we all know that we have contributions across the board in an even playing scheme where we have some really good discussions, which people have been privy to tonight. I think, look, call me out if I'm being that person, but there was a lot of energy in the room tonight, whether it be good or bad, and some of the comments of some people leaving was shame on you, based on some decisions that are made today. And I just kind of wanted to put it out there that in the position that we are as councillors, we are damned if we do and we're damned if we don't. There is going to be someone who agrees with the decision that we're making, and there is going to be someone who disagrees with the decision that we are making, and someone is going to have some feathers ruffled in the processes of that. Us as councillors are sitting here making the best decisions that we can based on the information and the expertise of those around us, and informing the decisions that we make on a personal level. And as you can see, when we make these decisions, it's not always unanimous. Okay, there are you know, we can completely see that. We have to be making decisions based on economic drive and the benefit to the community, like things like, you know, the diving board last month that we made. And then there's decisions based on legislation, determination, where we're kind of at a point where things are being assessed against what is allowable, and there are, as we've mentioned, ways and means in which that can be taken further and the decision taken away from us. And I think it needs to be really noted that the decision that we made tonight, yes, there were some really angry people and there will continue to be, and I will be stopped in the supermarket, no doubt, and I will have these conversations with community members, but the respect that you give me will be the same respect that I give back to you. And I think that we need to be really open and honest and clear about the fact that we didn't have to call in a certain decision tonight. This decision could have been made behind closed doors and not shared with the public, and in all honesty it would have been assessed, and you know, 99% sure that the decision of council staff would have been the same and the recommendation didn't have to come to council for a decision. So it allowed further consultation, further things to be discussed with the developers and what it is that the community want to see and benefit from. And I think that I personally believe that that has happened in benefit by us making this decision and calling this in to continue those discussions. So I just kind of wanted to put that out there, that we had 38 people in the gallery, we had over 70 people watching on YouTube, and as soon as those decisions were made, we had 2 people sitting in the gallery and our YouTube went down to 20 viewers live. So there are decisions that are made outside what it is that you might be watching or following along, because that is what you're passionate about, but us as councillors have to sit here and make decisions across the board on things that everybody is passionate about. So that's that. Off the back of that land development strategy, you don't want to see something like this again. Pay attention to what's happening now. The land development strategy is out there for everybody to have a look at. If you don't have the ways and means in which to do it, or you know someone that doesn't, that might want to have an opinion, because I know there are people in our gallery that don't have access to certain services in order to get this, there are ways we can help each other shape the face and shape the future of our Alpine Shire by making comment. Just like you are on YouTube and in your gallery, you are here to look at the things that are going to benefit you. So Google search and Control F what it is that you want to have a look at, because that's what's going to shape where you live. You don't necessarily have to make future comment on what it looks like for someone in Toowoomba South when you live in Paulpunka, and vice versa. But if, as Councillor Janice has said, if you're not in the room, you're not going to be playing a part, right? So put yourself in the position, put something forward, because you never know how that could shape the future of the children, the grandchildren thereafter. On top of that, I just wanted to say, if anybody isn't aware, there is a container deposit scheme that we now have accessible points at Crispy's Hardware, the Myrtleford Cycle Centre in Myrtleford, and Settlers Tavern in Toowoomba South, where you can recycle your cans and bottles and get 10 cents back. So have a chat to your user groups, your youth development, further looking at the economic drive to reduce, reuse, recycle. It's been drummed into us for so long, but just wanted to make note of that for anyone who hadn't seen it, that it is now available. It's exciting. Good luck to the 3 centres that have actually got that in place, because I feel like they may be inundated. But you know, if it could be some really good ways to teach our children of doing the right thing, and they can get some pocket money in the process. But don't go and buy cans of something just to get 10 cents back, okay? Just, yeah, that's my 5 cents worth.
Thank you. 10 cents, actually. Thank you. Councillor Nicholas.
Well, I'm just going to add to that, because the cans need to, the barcode on the can needs to be clear, so
Correct.
you can't crush them. And Crispies would really like them sorted into the 3 different categories. So,
which I think is
probably all
good
do.
education.
The team's not comments will remain online. If we can just hold for a second.
Oh. Other than that, I was going to say the same thing about the land development strategy and the rural land strategy. Get in there. Got to be in it to win it. Yeah, that's all right. So I can't even turn up. Oh, it's my fault.
Let me. Yeah, I do. Of course I do.
I can't turn off my mic. Can you turn off my mic?
Apologies to those that are still watching. We thought at this end that we had gone offline, and that being the case, we basically had to have a little bit of an interim here.
Apologies.
Councillor Nicholas, had you finished your general business?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Mr CEO, general business.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have one item this evening. So I think it's fair to say that we've been providing a public bin and amenity cleaning service which hasn't been meeting the expectations of our community. I want to let you know that as of Thursday this week, the current provider of that service, which is Peoplework, they'll be ending their contract, and from Friday we'll be putting a new arrangement in place to deliver the service over the coming months through to the beginning of February. I'll provide more details over the coming days of what that service will look like, but at the moment it's shaping up to be four discrete contracts, predominantly, if not entirely, local resources. So a business based in Mount Beauty, 2 businesses based in Bright, and a provider that's already a known entity to the Alpine Shire Council who's been providing the service for a number of years. So we're pretty excited about it. We'll share some news over the coming days of how that might look. But I just wanted to let you know that we are aware of the issues. We do apologise to the community because we have been falling short, but we have been working hard in the background to put a solution in place.
Just on that, is this solution an interim solution, or is this a long-term solution?
So at this stage, it's an interim solution to get us through the busy summer period through to the beginning of February. We're working on what the longer solution might look like, and the interim solution might form part of that longer solution or might not. We've still got to finalise the details of what happens beyond February, but certainly it'll give us an opportunity through Christmas and New Year to have a look at some of our local providers and establish what their capability is to deliver this service for us.
Thank you. I have 2 items only. Councillor Hughes, I totally agree with all of your comments. I will do it in a dot point form, and that is to simply say that decisions made at this bench up here on council are for the whole of the community, not just a few. And I think that needs to be taken into consideration. My only other point is I'd really like to thank the interim chair tonight. Did a splendid job of fielding those questions. Now you know what it's like. So very well done. All right, item 13, motions for which notice has previously been given. There are none. However, item 14, receptions and reading of petitions, I believe there is one. Mr CEO.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr Mayor. The recommendation this evening is that Council notes and receives a petition containing 156 signatures from the Upper Kiewa Valley Community Association requesting at least 1 charging station for electric vehicles/cars to be established in the central business district of Mount Beauty, which is available to serve locals and tourists alike, and that a report be prepared for the next ordinary council meeting.
Certainly. Do I have a mover for that? Yeah, Councillor Nicholas. Councillor Janis. Councillor Nicholas, any comments?
No, I look forward to the response.
Thank you. Councillor Janis.
It was mooted that at one of the meetings there only a couple of months ago I knew this was going to come.
Thank you. Those, any other comments quickly? No? No? Those in favour? Thank you. That is passed unanimously. And that being the case, there are no documents for sealing, so I am going to, at this point in time, declare the meeting closed at 8:28 p.m. Thank you very much for those still attending. Thank you.
Well done, Tony.